There are soldiers and then there are these guys. The best of the best, operating in the dead of night where no one can see them. They were called Special Force 709. In this unit, they had a very specific tradition for promotions. It wasn't a ceremony, it was a fight for survival. Everyone had to fight until only one person was left standing. It was a pure combat for survival. A fist connected hard with his face. But this brutal tradition was about to be abolished by a single person. By the end, every single member of the unit was on the ground, unable to get back up. It would take them weeks to recover. He was the only one left. The tradition was officially over. It wasn't because of a rule change. It was because one guy was just too strong. Back at headquarters, his commander was furious. The other soldiers were so scared they wanted to quit on the spot. And asked for the next challenger, the cause of all this chaos, Kim Joo-hyuk, was stamped unqualified and forced out of the military. His career was over, but his legend was just beginning. His file was marked top secret. And just like that, the most dangerous soldier they had was released back into normal society. 3 years passed, the battlefield was replaced with a skyscraper. Joo-hyuk was now just another office worker. But even here, he couldn't escape conflict. He got slapped hard across the face while his boss, Deputy Chief Choi, screamed at him to get his act together. Deputy Chief Choi kept yelling, asking if it made sense for an office worker to be sleeping on the job, all while tossing used tissues onto Joo-hyuk's desk. Joo-hyuk looked up completely stunned. He couldn't believe what his boss was throwing at him. He realized it was a crumpled, used tissue. The deputy chief didn't even try to hide it. He just explained that those were the tissues he'd used to blow his nose. Then he tossed another one over the monitor and ordered Joo-hyuk to throw them away for him. That was it, the disrespect was too much. Joo-hyuk was absolutely furious. Instead of lashing out, he reached for his phone. He started typing furiously on an anonymous work forum. He laid it all out, how his boss dumped all his work on him and even threw used tissues at his desk, acting like some kind of army supervisor. He thought about what would happen if his boss had been his junior in the military. He swore that if he ever got reinstated, he'd teach that guy a serious lesson before he quit for good. The power trip was just too much. He slammed his hand down on the desk, furious. His phone hit the desk with a thud. He let out a long sigh. For now, he just had to put up with it. He had to keep telling himself that he couldn't do anything. His opponent was a civilian. But then a notification popped up on his screen. Someone had left a new comment on his post. The comment was strange. It offered him a chance, calling him a slave to society and mentioning something called the Puppet Project. Suddenly, a pair of sleek black glasses appeared right in front of his eyes. He had no idea what this project was, but it looked like it was starting right now. The glasses suddenly activated. Joo-hyuk felt a jolt as information flooded his brain. He had no idea what was happening. Everything was a blur. His eyes refocused, but something felt very off. Then he saw it. A digital pattern appeared in his left eye, like a computer screen was inside his head. A blue window popped up in his vision, floating over his desk. The system told him his registration was complete. Another message confirmed the connection. The system identified him as tester P099 and announced that his first test was beginning. That's when he heard it, a voice inside his head. He panicked, grabbing the glasses. He ripped the glasses off his face and threw them onto the desk. He stared at the glasses, a fresh cut on his face from the jolt. He couldn't make sense of what just happened. Then another message appeared. The system warned him that if he didn't wear the glasses for more than 60 seconds, he'd get an electric shock. The truth hit him, he couldn't take them off. He was stuck with them. He tried to think back. These were just some glasses the company gave him. What was going on? That's when a woman's voice called out his name, pulling him out of his thoughts. He looked up, startled. The woman sounded worried and was asking if he was okay. It was Ms. Soo-yeon, one of his co-workers. He stared at her, completely caught off guard. She gave him a small smile, but told him he didn't look so good. He wanted to explain what was wrong, but another warning flashed in his vision. The system told him that if he revealed the secret of the glasses to anyone, he'd get shocked. He couldn't say a word. He just stared at her, trying to figure out what to say. He couldn't tell her the truth, not with the system watching. Quickly put his glasses on and insisted he was fine, that it was nothing serious. Ms. Soo-yeon looked relieved. She then started to ask if he wanted to do something after work. Before she could finish, another coworker interrupted them. It was Deputy Chief Choi, and he sarcastically asked if they were having a private meeting. He grinned and invited himself along, saying he knew a great bar. Then he turned to Ms. Soo-yeon. He suggested that since Joo-hyuk had to work late again, she should just go with him instead. The deputy chief added that there was no need to be considerate of people who worked overtime because they were incompetent. Joo-hyuk's hand clenched into a fist. He wasn't done. He mocked Joo-hyuk for not even being able to say a word, claiming he had no self-esteem. Ms. Soo-yeon just decided to go back to her seat, ending the conversation right there. The deputy chief stood by, watching her go. But inside, Joo-hyuk was seething. He wasn't backing down because he was weak. He was holding it all in because they were in the middle of the office. The deputy chief just stared at him, wondering why anyone even liked the guy. Joo-hyuk kept his head down, trying to get his anger under control. That's when something strange happened. A blue window popped up in his vision, showing his personal info. The system told him a mission algorithm was now active. A mission he had no idea what it was talking about. A small light started blinking on the frame of his glasses. The system then gave him a command: analyze the people around him. Through the glasses, a started running on the deputy chief, who was getting angrier by the second. Joo-hyuk looked up, his face a mix of shock and confusion. The deputy chief saw his expression and demanded to know what was wrong. But Joo-hyuk wasn't focused on him anymore. The world around him started to glitch as the system in his glasses came to life. The system told him his first mission was about to begin. The system then confirmed this wasn't some kind of joke. Of all people, Deputy Chief Choi Jae-hong had been selected as the mission's target. The mission was simple and completely insane. He had to tell his furious boss to stop swearing. And to make things worse, there was a time limit. If he didn't do it, he'd face a penalty. Just then, the deputy chief told him to follow him to the rooftop. Joo Hyuk's mind was racing. A mission? A penalty? None of this made any sense. He sat there completely lost. What in the world was this situation? A red countdown started floating in his vision. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some new high-tech device from the company, and they were using employees to test it. He looked around for hidden cameras, anything that could explain it, but if it wasn't a test, then what was it? He wondered if he was going completely crazy. A system message flashed in his vision, warning him that a penalty was being applied. The message was about his account. It showed a massive loss rate. He couldn't understand what was happening. He quickly grabbed his phone to check his real bank account. He opened the banking apps. Staring at the screen, he thought this had to be some kind of sick joke. But it wasn't a joke. His asset status was negative, but his current balance was over 14 million. It made no sense. He just stared, completely frozen. Finally, he snapped. He slammed his hands on the desk, shouting, "This was absolutely insane." Suddenly, Joo Hyuk was on his feet. The entire office had stopped to stare at him. A woman's voice called out his name, breaking the tense silence. But someone else had noticed too. Deputy Chief Choi was glaring at him, clearly thinking the whole display was meant for him. A little while later, the deputy chief pulled him outside. He got right in Joo Hyuk's face, poking him hard in the chest. He demanded to know if Joo Hyuk had lost his mind. Joo Hyuk didn't say a word. He just listened as the deputy chief kept yelling, asking what the hell he thought he was doing. Choi lit a cigarette and told him he knew exactly what kind of person Joo Hyuk was. He said he hated guys who work out and think they're better than everyone else. But what really annoyed him, he said, was that Joo Hyuk didn't seem scared of him. Instead, it felt like Joo Hyuk was avoiding him because he found him dirty and pathetic. The deputy chief got even more aggressive. He demanded Joo Hyuk tell him to his face if he really thought he was so pathetic. Choi had a nasty grin on his face, clearly enjoying this. But Joo Hyuk knew he had to just hold his tongue. He had to make a living, and for now, this was part of the price. So with his head bowed, Joo Hyuk simply apologized. He just stood there ready to endure whatever came next. That's when a woman's voice cut through the silence, asking why he was holding back. It was Ms. Soo-yeon. She walked right up to him and asked if he was stupid. He looked up, completely surprised to see her there. She didn't hold back. She told him that life was already hard enough without having to put up with guys like the deputy chief, and she couldn't understand why he was just letting it happen. She told him that in a world this messed up, you have to know when to fight back. Then she gave him a wink, holding up a small black recorder. She looked right at Joo Hyuk and told him not to feel so down. He just stared, unsure what to do, while the deputy chief looked on with disgust. She made it clear that Joo Hyuk wasn't the one who needed to apologize here. Then she turned her attention to Deputy Chief Choi. She asked him exactly what he thought he was doing, and his expression turned to pure rage. He finally realized what she was doing. He lunged forward, screaming at her to delete the recording immediately. He reached out to snatch the recorder from her hand. For a split second, she looked completely surprised by his aggression. But before he could touch her, another hand shot out and grabbed his wrist, stopping him cold. It was Joo Hyuk. The deputy chief stared in disbelief, his arm caught in an iron grip. He demanded to know if they had both lost their minds. The deputy chief was completely losing it, screaming at Joo Hyuk to let him go. That's when the system in his glasses kicked in, detecting the deputy chief's aggressive words and behavior. Joo Hyuk tightened his grip on the man's shirt. A new mission popped up, ordering him to hit the deputy chief right in the Adam's apple. But Joo Hyuk just spoke calmly. He said he's a patient person and can put up with a lot. But his expression turned cold as he added a condition. His patience only applies when it's just him being targeted. That just made the deputy chief even angrier. He screamed, asking if Joo Hyuk was crazy, and threw a wild punch. He yelled, demanding to know if Joo Hyuk was ready to handle what would happen next. Joo Hyuk didn't even flinch. He just blocked the punch with his own fist and calmly turned the question back on him. He calmly asked the deputy chief if he was curious to see what would happen. And then he struck, hitting the man square in the throat. The deputy chief choked, his eyes wide with shock. Joo Hyuk looked down at him and told him to shut his mouth. The man collapsed, hitting the ground hard. Without even looking back at the body, Joo Hyuk turned to a terrified Ms. Soo-yeon. He told her he needed to ask for favor. He told her to just act like she hadn't seen a thing. At that moment, the system confirmed his mission was a success and that a reward was being sent. A notification popped up in his vision. His account profit had just hit 200%. Joo Hyuk looked at his phone with a grin. He was starting to understand how this all worked. The deputy chief choked, absolutely furious. He screamed, asking if Joo Hyuk was insane for daring to hit a superior. But the system detected that the man's aggressive behavior hadn't changed. A new mission appeared in Joo Hyuk's vision: knock him out. At that moment, Joo Hyuk didn't care who was behind these missions or why they were happening. He was actually having fun. A wide, unsettling grin spread across his face. This was the most interesting thing that had happened to him since he joined the company. The deputy chief had enough. He raised his fists ready to fight back. He lunged forward, throwing a punch. Joo Hyuk calmly thought about why he'd put up with this life for so long. It was all to make money like a normal person. But he caught the fist easily. He realized that if someone was going to pay him to do this, then his old way of life was over. He decided there was no reason not to do it. A huge, unsettling smile stretched across his face. Without wasting a second, he moved in and landed a solid blow to the deputy chief's head. He lifted the man clean off the ground, locking him in a chokehold. The deputy chief gasped for air, completely helpless. As the man struggled, Ju Hyuk calmly whispered that it would all be over soon. The deputy chief's eyes rolled back into his head. He was losing consciousness. With the job done, Ju Hyuk slammed him face first onto the floor. A notification popped up in his vision. The system confirmed the mission was a success. And the reward was huge, a 500% profit bonus. He immediately pulled out his phone to check his bank account. The number he saw on the screen was so big, he couldn't believe it was real. A wild, greedy grin spread across his face. It felt like the money was just making more money all by itself. He loosened his tie, feeling a powerful rush he hadn't experienced in a very long time. He remembered a job interview back when he was trying to be normal. The man across the desk asked him about his ambitions. Ju Hyuk had answered with a confident smile. He explained that he was someone who flawlessly completed any task he was given. After that first big payout, the mysterious missions just kept coming. They were ridiculous, but he did them all for the reward. First, he was ordered to reveal that his team leader Na Jin-sang wore a wig. Then he had to pour soda on director Kim Gon-dee's prized orchid. He ordered sushi alone during lunch, stayed overnight in the CO's office, and even exposed a manager's affair. The tasks were small, but the reward stacked up fast. All of it happened in just 3 days. And the result of all that chaos, millions. He let out a low, satisfied laugh. Checked his bank account. The balance was over 587 million won. It was an unbelievable amount of money for just a few days of work. He completely lost it, bursting into a wild laugh. He was finally rich. He stood there on the rooftop, feeling on top of the world. But his celebration was cut short. He suddenly stopped. Something was coming towards him. A drone flew right up to him, hovering in the air. It dropped a small black box right in front of him. He caught it. A message appeared in his vision, telling him he had passed the test. He was confused. The test was over. He didn't even know he was taking one. He opened the box. Inside was a single golden ticket labeled loan ticket. A new message popped up in his vision. It explained that the test was just the beginning. Now, the main mission was about to start. The objective was insane. He had to gather 1 billion won in just 7 days. He couldn't believe what he was reading. The drone hovered there, its creepy puppet face watching him as the message continued. It stated that anyone who couldn't gather the money wouldn't be able to move on to the next stage. And the worst part, all the money he had earned so far would be completely wiped out. Everything would be reset to zero. He sat at his old desk staring at the blank screen. His normal life felt like a distant memory now. He had a choice to make. He stared at the mission details. 1 billion won in 7 days. He was still short hundreds of millions. The goal felt completely out of reach. Then he remembered the ticket. According to the system, it was a loan ticket, good for 100 million won each time he used it. Alone, the idea made him uneasy. It could be a huge help or it could be a trap. He sat back in his chair, frustrated. There was just too little information to make a good decision. He pushed his glasses up, his mind shifting gears. He had to figure out who was behind all this and where these glasses even came from. The problem was there was no one he could ask. Just then, he saw a manager walking past his desk. The man was heading toward the elevator, about to leave. Suddenly, a huge fake smile spread across Ju Hyuk's face. He shot his hand up and called out, trying to get the manager's attention before he was gone. The manager froze, looking like he'd just seen a ghost. Ju Hyuk yelled across the room, demanding the manager stop ignoring him and come. The man started sweating. He'd been avoiding Ju Hyuk for days and now he was trapped. Before he could even think, Ju Hyuk was right in his face. He calmly told the terrified man he just had a question. Clamped a hand over the manager's mouth to shut him up. With a chilling look, he told him to answer one question quietly. What did he know about the company's custom-made glasses? The manager just shook his head, tears streaming down his face. Ju Hyuk pushed, asking if he'd really never heard of them. Ju Hyuk wasn't about to take his word for it. He activated one of his glasses' functions, the lie detector. The manager was terrified. He swore he really didn't know anything. The lie detector confirmed it. The man wasn't lying. So Ju Hyuk asked him if he'd ever seen glasses like his at the company before. The manager shook his head. That's when it clicked for Ju Hyuk. Someone had lied, making him think the glasses were a company gift. He didn't have enough information to go on. Just then, a notification sound pinged in his ear. A new message appeared right in front of his eyes. A wide, greedy smile spread across his face. He decided he was leaving work early. The message was an alert. A new game was starting nearby in just 30 minutes, and the reward for winning was massive. He wasn't about to let an opportunity like this pass him by. You have to move when the time is right. He grabbed his jacket and sprinted out of the office. He yelled back at his boss to take care of everything, completely ignoring the manager calling after him. The manager was left behind, completely losing it. He was crying and screaming, but Ju Hyuk was already gone. Following the directions from his glasses, Ju Hyuk arrived at a dark, empty construction site. He walked onto the site, the ground sparkling under the work lights. He looked around the empty space, wondering if this was really the right place. He tapped his glasses, and the display confirmed this was the location the system had sent him to. Just then, a new message popped up in his vision. The system announced that a contest between participants was about to start. The word participants caught him off guard. He realized for the first time that he wasn't the only one playing this game. The system then explained the rules. It was a money bag contest. Whoever was holding the bag at the end of the game would win. He looked across the empty construction site. Something in the middle of the room immediately caught his eye. It was a black briefcase just sitting there. He realized this had to be the money bag the system was talking about. He walked over to it, wondering if it could really be that simple. It just seemed too easy being left out in the open like that. He opened the case to see what was inside. It was packed with cash. A new rule appeared in his vision. If another participant stole the bag, he would lose an amount equal to what was inside. He quickly did the math. If he could just hold on to it for a few minutes, he'd get millions. A huge, greedy grin spread across his face. The system's countdown clock appeared in his vision. The game had started. He grabbed the handle of the briefcase. He decided right then and there that he would defend it with his life. The moment he picked up the case, he wasn't alone anymore. 3 other men stepped out of the shadows, armed with knives and a bat. One of them immediately started mocking him, asking if he was stupid for grabbing the prize so quickly. The one holding the baseball bat had a smug look on his face. He could tell Ju Hyuk was a newbie, probably playing the game for the very first time. Another one, a guy with a knife, grinned like a maniac. He promised Ju Hyuk he was about to have a very memorable experience. They told him to just leave the bag and walk away, saying they didn't want to get a penalty. That's when it clicked for Ju Hyuk. These guys were participants just like him. But Ju Hyuk didn't even flinch. He told them he had no intention of doing that. In fact, he challenged them to try and steal it. The man with the bat couldn't believe it. He laughed, asking if Ju Hyuk was serious about them trying to take it. They asked if he even understood the situation he was in. But Ju Hyuk just looked back at them, wondering if there was really anything complicated to understand. A confident, almost dangerous smile spread across his face. As far as he was concerned, it was simple. All he had to do was beat them up. The man with the bat laughed, accusing Ju Hyuk of being driven mad by greed. He asked if he had any idea who he was messing with. Ju Hyuk just smiled back. He flipped the question on them, asking if they knew who he was. The guy's face twisted with rage. He screamed and charged forward, swinging the bat with everything he had. He aimed right for Ju Hyuk's head, but the bat never hit him. Ju Hyuk just lifted the briefcase and blocked the attack easily. A message popped up in his vision, approving his bravado. The attacker froze, his eyes wide. He couldn't believe what just happened. Ju Hyuk looked back at him, unimpressed. The system added another message, pointing out that the guy had completely failed to grasp the situation. Instead of just blocking, Ju Hyuk used the man's own momentum against him. He slammed the briefcase forward with brutal force. The attacker couldn't even process what happened as he was sent flying backward. He sailed through the air, completely helpless. Then he crashed hard into a pile of metal pipes. The other 2 guys just stared, completely frozen. They couldn't believe what they just saw. Ju Hyuk calmly adjusted his glasses. He started to wonder if all the participants in this game were at this same low level. If they were, he thought this might be way easier than he expected. A huge, confident grin spread across his face. Seeing his smile, the other 2 men tensed up. The one in the beanie pulled out a knife, getting ready for a fight. The 2 of them moved together, ready to attack. Ju Hyuk just watched them, completely unimpressed. He calmly asked if they thought they had some kind of teamwork. Turns out the blonde guy had a knife too. Ju Hyuk mocked them for trying to set up positions like they were actual fighters. That really ticked them off. They screamed, threatening to see if he'd still be talking after they stabbed him. And with that, they charged. One came from the front, the other from the side. But Ju Hyuk didn't even flinch. Instead, he stomped his foot down hard, kicking up a huge cloud of dust and dirt. The dust cloud completely blinded the guy in the beanie. He grinned, probably thinking his partner had it covered. The blonde attacker kept charging forward, yelling about how Ju Hyuk couldn't possibly handle an attack from the front. The blonde attacker screamed, asking who was going to save him now. But Ju Hyuk just stood there, completely unimpressed. He lunged forward, trying to stab Ju Hyuk right in the gut. But Ju Hyuk moved like lightning. He twisted out of the way and grabbed the attacker's wrist in one smooth motion. With a smirk, he held up the knife he'd just taken. He condescendingly asked if that was really how the guy thought you use a dagger. The attacker couldn't believe it. He screamed for Ju Hyuk to just die already. Without a moment of hesitation, Ju Hyuk struck. The attacker gritted his teeth, waiting for the pain. Ju Hyuk calmly told him that he'd warned him to just leave the bag and walk away. But the pain never came. The attacker looked down, completely confused. The knife wasn't in him, it was stuck deep in the briefcase. That's when a new notification popped up in Ju Hyuk's vision, telling him he'd just learned how to use a dagger. The system declared the mission a failure, but Ju Hyuk just grinned. With a flick of his wrist, the broken tip of the knife flew straight through the air. The attacker stared up in horror, stammering as he asked what on earth Ju Hyuk was doing. But the briefcase wasn't aimed at him. It crashed down hard on the head of an old man standing nearby. The blonde attacker was out cold on the floor. Ju Hyuk looked down and asked if he really wanted to know what he did for a living. He casually brushed some dust off his suit jacket, explained that he was just an ordinary veteran from the 709 Secret Special Task Force. And as he stood there, a thought suddenly occurred to him. He turned back with a confident smile. He had a question. The attacker was still reeling, covering his eye in fear. Ju Hyuk calmly told him that since he wasn't attacking, they should talk. The man was completely panicked, unable to understand what was happening. Ju Hyuk got straight to the point. He asked if the man knew who was running this whole game. The attacker yelled that he had no idea. He pointed to a glowing watch on his wrist, explaining he just got the device and joined in. Ju Hyuk noticed the watch. It was different from his glasses, and he started wondering what that meant. He couldn't figure out why his device was different from everyone else's. But while Ju Hyuk was lost in thought, the attacker saw his chance. A nasty grin spread across his face as he tightened his grip on the knife, thinking his opponent was getting careless. Ju Hyuk looked down at him and asked if he really thought he could get away with using that knife. The man was terrified, stammering that he wouldn't do anything. Ju Hyuk told him that was too bad because he was still going to get hit. And without another word, he landed a solid punch right to the man's face. The man collapsed to the ground out cold. Ju Hyuk looked at the 2 fallen men, unimpressed by how weak they were. He stood there for a moment, his attention shifting elsewhere. Suddenly, another player started yelling in panic. The system announced that player P016 was now bankrupt. The man couldn't believe it, screaming that the rules were unfair. A new message appeared in Ju Hyuk's vision. The player's debt had hit 1 billion and collection was about to begin. Suddenly, the bracelet on the bankrupt player's arm lit up, glowing an intense red. Another player watched from a distance, completely confused by what was happening. The blonde player began to stumble, groaning in pain. Purple veins started bulging across his skin. He looked absolutely terrified as he begged for someone to save him. A moment later, he collapsed to the ground, completely still. The man watching suddenly understood. It must have been a reaction to a drug. He wondered if the player's device had some kind of hidden injector. A wave of panic hit him. The game's creators had planned for this. He was just a fish who had taken the bait. He realized that every single person here was blinded by the promise of money. He understood then that they were all the same, and now there was no way out. In this game, the participants would either become incredibly rich, or they would lose everything. There was no other option. It was only then that he truly understood the trap he was in. The truth of it hit him hard, a sudden, violent shock. He looked at the players in front of him. Every single person in this game is completely controlled by the promise of money. They would do anything for money. He was being watched. Multiple drone feeds were focused on him, broadcasting his every move. He knew they were all just puppets in this game, and he saw what happened to the puppets whose strings were cut. The system was cold and efficient, collecting the bankrupt participants and simply moving on to the next. He adjusted his glasses, thinking. He'd wondered why the missions had seemed so easy. Turns out that was just the bait. The real game was about to begin. He looked around at the huge crowd of people gathered in the warehouse. All of them were here for the same reason. A new mission popped up in his vision, a money bag scramble with 48 participants. A slow grin spread across his face. This was going to be interesting. High above, a drone watched as the players spread out across the floor, each one finding their starting position. A red timer appeared in his vision. The countdown had started. In the wild, the top predator is always clear. You can always see the tracks it leaves behind. The Siberian tiger, the strongest of them all. It fears nothing, but even a tiger has to be careful when facing a pack of wolves. But Ju Hyuk wasn't a tiger. He was something else entirely. Now that things had come to this, he saw only one way forward. A new skill appeared in his vision. To him, facing dozens of opponents didn't even matter. In fact, he was excited. It had been a long time since he'd had a real chance to warm up. The promise of 300 million won was all it took. Driven by greed, the other players charged at Ju Hyuk all at once. He just smirked. He wasn't threatened at all. He was actually enjoying this. Facing dozens of opponents didn't even matter, bag bashing. He tightened his grip on the briefcase. He swung the heavy bag in a huge arc, slamming it into the first wave of attackers. The impact was brutal, sending them flying. But it wasn't just a physical hit. For every person he struck, a notification appeared, a 300 million won loss. The players started screaming in panic. Their money was just gone. That's when it hit them. They stared in disbelief. Just one hit from his bag and they'd lose everything. The players were completely frozen. They knew attacking him meant instant bankruptcy. Seeing their fear, Ju Hyuk just taunted them, asking why they were hesitating. He had a wild grin on his face. He was clearly enjoying this. He asked if they'd rather he came to them. As Ju Hyuk started walking forward, the players scrambled backwards in pure panic. One of them yelled for everyone to throw things to stop him. It seemed like a good idea. If they couldn't get close, maybe attacking from a distance would work. They all started throwing whatever they could find. But it was useless. Ju Hyuk just held up the briefcase and everything they threw bounced right off. The player who came up with the idea stared in disbelief. Their plan hadn't worked at all. His shock quickly turned to pure terror. Nothing they did could even touch this guy. And with their plan completely broken, Ju Hyuk leaped into the air, ready to bring the briefcase down on them. The briefcase slammed down with incredible force. A message popped up in the player's vision, a 300 million loss just like that. He hit the floor completely out. The system immediately declared player P036 bankrupt. The other players stared in absolute horror. They couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. With one player down, Ju Hyuk turned to the rest of the crowd. He asked them who wanted to get hit next. From the shadows, two figures in strange masks watched the whole thing unfold without saying a word. Panic started to spread. One player yelled that he was giving up. Another reminded him it would cost 100 million, but he didn't care. It was still better than losing 300 million and going bankrupt. That was it. The players started running for their lives, screaming that they didn't want to be eliminated by bankruptcy. As the crowd scattered, Ju Hyuk looked at the few who remained. He asked them if they were really going to see this through to the end. But the ones who stayed had no other choice. One of them yelled that he was already 900 million in debt. They had nothing to lose. Ju Hyuk just grinned. He told them to stop talking and just come at him. That was all it took. The remaining players charged forward, swinging whatever weapons they could find. He watched them come completely unfazed. He was actually pleased. He thought to himself that this is what they should have done from the very beginning. High above, the drones kept recording every moment. But they weren't the only ones watching. A figure in a strange stitched mask appeared out of nowhere. And just like that, the fight began. A splash of blood hit the floor. The last man standing grunted in pain before he collapsed. The fight was already over. Ju Hyuk stood over him, surrounded by the bodies of everyone else he'd taken down. He looked at his suit and complained that it was a mess. Right on cue, the timer in his vision hit 0. A new message popped up, mission accomplished. He had just acquired 300 million won. A huge manic grin spread across his face. He figured he could just buy a new suit anyway. The system then announced that the mission was over and all participants should leave. With the money bag slung over his shoulder, Ju Hyuk turned and walked away. He left the field of unconscious players behind without a second glance, casually saying that he'd had fun. But he wasn't the only one who'd been watching. From the shadows, the masked figure stared after him, their attention now completely fixed on that one participant. The woman commented that at this rate, he wouldn't be able to last very long. The masked figure agreed. Ju Hyuk was special, but he was drawing way too much attention. He had no idea just how dangerous his new life had become. Before all this, every day was exactly the same for him. It was a life without purpose. He would work until he was about to pass out from exhaustion. Then he'd always go back to a dark, empty house, but today was different. He was staying at the Sigrel Hotel. He'd booked a suite that cost 20 million won for a single night. The food that arrived was on another level. This wasn't just a meal, it was a feast. He thought about the money, an amount that would normally take decades to earn. He had made it all in just 4 days. The thought was thrilling. A huge, crazed grin spread across his face. He felt like he was on top of the world. This was life. He gripped the sheets, the feeling almost too much to handle. He clenched his fist, his expression hardening. This was just the beginning. Just then, he heard footsteps approaching his table. A hotel employee arrived with his room service, placing the dish down in front of him. It was a Korean beefsteak, cooked by a Michelin star chef. This was the kind of food he'd only ever dreamed of. He didn't waste any time. He cut off a piece ready for the first bite. He lifted the fork to his mouth, his eyes wide with expectation. The moment the meat touched his tongue, something changed. It wasn't just good. The flavor was so intense it was almost a shock to his system. The hotel employee who brought the food leaned in with a smile, asking if the steak was to his liking. He couldn't even answer. His mind was completely blank, overwhelmed by the taste. A huge, strange grin spread across his face as he finally managed to say it. The steak was absolutely, unbelievably delicious. Elsewhere, a woman listened intently to an earpiece, a nervous sweat trickling down her face. Suddenly, she ripped off her wig in frustration. She couldn't believe how reckless he was being and wondered if he felt any fear at all. Ju Hyuk just kept eating, his mouth full. He casually greeted her as if nothing was wrong. She walked right into his room, still taking off her disguise. She was stunned that he wasn't surprised, questioning how a participant could be so careless. Ju Hyuk calmly told her that he'd known all along. The woman was speechless. He then laid it all out, saying he knew she'd been following him since the construction site. Then he turned his attention to a dark corner of the room, revealing he knew about the other person hiding there too. From the shadows, a second man spoke. He realized that Ju Hyuk hadn't just noticed them, he had let them follow him. A third man with white hair and a confident smirk found the situation fascinating. Ju Hyuk knew everything, yet he did nothing to stop them. Ju Hyuk explained that he knew they were following him but didn't do anything about it. He figured they weren't dangerous. But more importantly, he needed someone to ask about the missions. He had a lot of questions. The older man smirked, realizing Ju Hyuk was trying to get information out of him. It seemed they both wanted something from this meeting. He told Ju Hyuk that the timing was perfect, because he had some questions of his own. The conversation paused for a moment. The older man started first, asking Ju Hyuk a simple question. How did he get involved in the missions? Ju Hyuk explained that he joined just like they did. He got a device and completed a test mission. The man smiled. He asked that if that was true, then why wasn't there a device on his wrist? Ju Hyuk just smirked and asked if there was a rule that the device had to be on his wrist. He was careful not to tell them about his glasses. The older man joked about him wearing an electronic ankle monitor instead, which made the woman next to him gasp. But Ju Hyuk wasn't playing around. He got straight to the point and asked if they knew how to remove the device. He pressed them further, asking what the price of freedom was. The older man stared back at him for a moment, letting the question hang in the air. Then he gave the answer, 2 billion. He explained that until that huge amount of money was paid, the device would never come off. Ju Hyuk asked if he was talking about the game's operators. The man confirmed that he was. The man explained that the operators were the ones who created this hell. He said they were the real rulers of the dark web, rumored to be holding tens of billions of dollars. In this world they built, the participants were nothing but pawns. They struggle through missions, fall into massive debt using loan tickets, and eventually go bankrupt, getting dragged off to who knows where. And so far, he said, no one who's been taken has ever come back. Ju Hyuk listened to all of this, then asked a simple question. Why was he being told all this? The old man explained that he needed to find out what kind of person Ju Hyuk was. He laid out the choice. Was freedom more important to him, or was it the money? Ju Hyuk just smirked, as if the answer to the old man's question was completely obvious. He explained his plan was simple. Once he made 10 billion, he could just buy his freedom. The old man listened, noting that money was clearly the priority. He then asked if Ju Hyuk was really confident enough to win any mission. With that, he proposed they play a simple game and tapped a device on his wrist. A moment later, a notification popped up in Ju Hyuk's vision. Player P002 was requesting a private random game. The system asked if he would accept. Ju Hyuk looked over at the old man, wondering if this was some kind of test. But he wasn't the type to back down from a fight. He immediately accepted the request. The system then prompted him to confirm his opponent's information. A scanner in his glasses activated, focusing on the old man. The finished and the information popped up in Ju Hyuk's vision. He froze. What he saw made him break out in a cold sweat. The old man just smiled, sensing his opponent's hesitation. He calmly asked if something was wrong. Turns out this wasn't just some old guy. This was Gu Woonmo, ranked number 3. Ju Hyuk's glasses showed the details. The man had 14 wins and only 1 loss. On top of that, he had over 6 billion in assets. The system warned him that the match was starting and he couldn't back out now. Ju Hyuk just smirked. He wasn't planning on it. Gu Wunmo grinned back, excited for the game to begin. He couldn't wait to see what kind of challenge this would be. The glasses prompted him to confirm his opponent's identity, and a scanner immediately activated. When the information came through, Ju Hyuk felt a drop of sweat run down his face. This was bad. The old man saw his reaction and smiled, casually asking if something was wrong. The system displayed the man's identity. It was Gu Wunmo, the number 3 ranked player. His record was even more intimidating, 14 wins and only a single loss. The man had over 6 billion in assets. Before Ju Hyuk could even process it all, a red warning flashed in his vision. The match was starting. The system added that he couldn't give up halfway. Ju Hyuk just smirked. He wasn't planning on it. Gu Wunmo's eyes lit up. He was eager to see what kind of game they'd be playing. Ju Hyuk tried to stop everything, suddenly realizing what a bad spot he was. But Gu Wunmo just grinned. He told him it was too late. The game was already underway. Right on cue, the system started choosing the game. A roulette spun through the options and finally landed on one, double dice. The rules were simple. If you rolled 2 different numbers, your score was just the higher of the 2 dice. But if you rolled a pair, the score was multiplied. Rolling 2 6s would get you a massive 36 points. And there was one special rule. If a player rolled in 1 and a 6, they would automatically win the whole game. Then a briefcase opened up filled with chips. This was what they were playing for. The dealer explained that each chip was worth 10 million won. Based on their assets, both players would start with 88 chips each. Gu Wunmo laid out another rule. The white dice would be rolled for everyone to see, but the black dice would be kept hidden under a cup for betting. Ju Hyuk asked if this was just a game of luck. Gu Wunmo agreed, but he noted how calm Ju Hyuk was, as if he already had a plan. He leaned in with a wild look in his eyes, asking Ju Hyuk if he was really that confident in his luck. Ju Hyuk just let out a small breath, a smirk playing on his lips. Then he suddenly shouted, telling Gu Wunmo to see for himself. He calmly explained that his entire life has been the perfect example of bad luck. He recalled his school days, saying he'd never once gotten a question right by guessing with a pencil. He'd never won the lottery, never gotten a lucky break in his entire life. He was making it clear that luck wasn't part of his plan. But then he thought about the money he'd made. Despite his claims of bad luck, he'd earned a fortune in just a few days. A confident grin spread across his face. He believed he wasn't the same unlucky person anymore. Gu Wunmo looked at him, asking if he was ready. Ju Hyuk saw this as more than a game. It was a chance to turn this whole crisis around. He slammed his fist on the table, ready to start. With a shout, he threw the dice. The die tumbled across the table. It landed on N1, the worst possible result. Ju Hyuk started sweating. It seemed his legendary bad luck had just made a comeback. He was sweating bullets. Now he had to see what his opponent rolled. Gu Wunmo looked down at his own die. He'd only rolled a 2. So N1 versus a 2, both were terrible rolls. But Ju Hyuk knew it wasn't over. Everything came down to the second die, which was still hidden in the cup. That's when Gu Wunmo smiled and raised his finger. He announced he was betting 100 million. Ju Hyuk couldn't believe it. Betting that much with such a low number and in the very first round, it was crazy. The game's rules were absolute. If he gave up now, he would lose everything he owned. There was no way to back out. Ju Hyuk was sweating, but he wasn't folding. He decided to call the 100 million bet. With the bet matched, the dealer announced it was time to reveal the second die. Everyone watched as the cup covering Gu Wunmo's die was slowly lifted. Ju Hyuk held his breath while Gu Wunmo just smiled, completely calm. The die was a 3. Since his first roll was a 2, the mismatch gave him a total score of only 3 points. Ju Hyuk couldn't believe his luck. The score was way lower than he expected. All he needed was a 4, 5, or 6 to win the round. Now it was his turn. The dealer lifted the cup to reveal his second die. It was N1, another 1. Ju Hyuk stared in disbelief, a pair of 1s. His score was only 2 points. System confirmed it instantly. Player 2 lost, 100 million won gone just like that. Gu Wunmo just smiled. He calmly pointed out that getting a pair in the first round was incredibly bad luck. But Ju Hyuk wasn't broken. He told himself he'd used up all his bad luck in that one round. From now on, things would be different. So the game continued, round after round. And it was a total disaster. No matter what Ju Hyuk rolled, Gu Wunmo's score was always higher. He just kept losing. With every loss, more of his chips were pushed to the other side of the table. He tried to keep his cool, but he couldn't stop his hand from shaking. He was getting absolutely destroyed. 300 million won gone in an instant. Gu Wunmo just smiled, looking completely in control. He announced that it was time for the final round. Ju Hyuk took a breath and rolled the first die. It tumbled across the table. The system announced his roll and 1 and a 6. A huge grin spread across Ju Hyuk's face. He finally got the roll he needed. Without a second thought, he pushed his last 100 million to the center of the table. He was going all in. But Gu Wunmo didn't just call. Instead, he offered Ju Hyuk a chance. He pushed every last one of his chips to the center of the table. If Ju Hyuk won, he could take everything. Ju Hyuk was floored. He couldn't figure out if the old man was crazy or just that confident. He ran through the possibilities. He'd already checked the dice and the cups. There was no way to cheat. There was only one thing left to do. He called the bet. The dealer moved to reveal the second die. This was it. A huge, confident grin spread across Gu Wunmo's face. He looked like he already knew the outcome. That's when Ju Hyuk realized he wasn't playing against an old man. He was playing against a snake. Turns out Gu Wunmo was a legend. They called him the White Snake, a gambler who could swallow luck itself. And in that moment, Ju Hyuk understood. He was never really playing a game, he was just the snake's prey. The second die was a 6. The system immediately declared Gu Won-mo the winner. Just like that, all 880 million won was gone. Gu Won-mo smiled, saying it was fun and that they should meet again. He left a card on the table, telling Ju Hyuk to come find him when he discovered something more important than money. On the card was a picture of a bird escaping a cage and the name Gu. The next day, Ju Hyuk was at a company dinner. The boss stood up, trying to get everyone excited for the get-together. Everyone raised their glasses for a toast, but not everyone seemed to be in a celebratory mood. While everyone else was drinking beer, Ju Hyuk was doing something different. He was chugging an entire bottle of soju through a straw. His co-workers just stared, completely stunned by what they were seeing. One of them mentioned that Ju Hyuk had been in a bad mood all day. Something was clearly wrong. One of his coworkers was sweating bullets, terrified of what Ju Hyuk might do next. But Ju Hyuk didn't care. He just kept drinking, lost in his own world. That's when a man in a fancy suit walked up to his table. He pointed out that it was a company dinner and asked Ju Hyuk if something was wrong at work. Ju Hyuk's glasses immediately scanned the man. Turns out this was the company president, Baek Deok-man. The president just smiled, waiting for a response. Ju Hyuk didn't say a word. Then he completely ignored the man and went right back to drinking his soju. His coworker absolutely lost it. He couldn't believe Ju Hyuk would just disrespect the president like that. He immediately started apologizing, trying to explain that his friend wasn't usually like this. The president kept his smile, suggesting that maybe it was hard for Ju Hyuk to talk in front of everyone. He put a hand on Ju Hyuk's shoulder and asked him to step outside for chat. Ju Hyuk just stared back, his expression hardening. For a second, nobody said anything. The other employees started whispering amongst themselves, commenting on how weird Ju Hyuk was acting. One of them laughed, saying she heard Ju Hyuk's investments had failed, and that's why he looked so miserable. Her friend looked worried, hoping everything would be okay as long as the president didn't get too drunk. She tried to calm her down, explaining that the president was actually a really nice guy when he was sober. They even had a nickname for him, the Smiling Buddha. Turns out he wasn't sober anymore. The friendly smile was gone, replaced by pure rage as he started screaming curses. The president grabbed Ju Hyuk by the tie, his words slurring. He told him to know his place and stop ruining the dinner party. He let go and stumbled back, ranting about how Ju Hyuk's generation had no ambition or common sense. The president kept screaming, calling him worthless for only earning a small salary and caring about work-life balance. He yelled that someone like Ju Hyuk could be replaced at any time. Ju Hyuk thought about the huge amount of money he'd lost. He realized it would take him decades of working under men like this just to earn it back. He wondered if he was doomed to live like a slave for the rest of his life, just to get that money again. The president got angry that Ju Hyuk wasn't responding. He slapped him hard across the face. Then he made a twisted offer. He said he'd pay Ju Hyuk for every slap he took. He told Ju Hyuk to be thankful for this lesson, sneering that he was originally planning to break his arm. Ju Hyuk was about to lose it. He told himself if he got slapped one more time, it was over. But right at that moment, a new mission popped up in his glasses. The system had a new task for him, and that changed everything. Suddenly, his anger was gone. He looked up at the president and said he'd changed his mind. The president didn't care. He just slapped Ju Hyuk again, counting it out loud. The man looked absolutely delighted with himself. But instead of getting angry, Ju Hyuk's face lit up with joy. He thanked the president, saying he'd finally opened his eyes to a true lesson. The president was completely baffled. Ju Hyuk then asked if he could stay by his side just for one day to receive more of his teachings. He grabbed the president's hand, a strange smile on his face. The man had no idea what was happening. Ju Hyuk's smile was wide and unsettling. He was playing a part and the president had no idea. The president was thrilled. He thought Ju Hyuk was finally showing him the proper respect. The president told him to come along and pour him a drink. With his arm around the man's shoulders, Ju Hyuk led him down a dark alley. And there it was, the mission was clear: kidnap the president. This whole act was just part of the plan. A huge manic grin spread across Ju Hyuk's face. He wasn't just doing this for the money anymore. He was going to enjoy it. The kidnapping operation was officially underway. He dragged the president through the dark streets, a wild look in his eyes. The mission was complete. For the president, it was game on. Sometime later, the president started to wake up. His head was pounding and he couldn't figure out where he was. That's when he realized he was tied to a chair. He looked up, completely stunned by what he saw. Ju Hyuk stood over him, a terrifying smile on his face. He held up a piece of rope and calmly told the man that he'd been kidnapped. The system then updated the mission. Ju Hyuk had to keep the president locked up for 24 hours. He had about 16 hours to go. The president couldn't believe it. He thought this had to be some kind of sick joke. But Ju Hyuk just reminded him of what happened earlier. He brought up how the president had dragged him around until 4 in the morning, making a scene and refusing to go home. A bead of sweat ran down the president's face. Ju Hyuk just kept talking, telling him that he was only doing what the man had wanted, so there was really no reason to complain. The president started yelling the moment he was fully awake. He demanded to be untied and wanted his phone back immediately. But Ju Hyuk just smiled. He calmly told the man that he'd already looked through the phone and found something strange. The president was furious, muttering insults under his breath. His anger exploded and he started screaming to be let go. He threatened Ju Hyuk, asking if he realized he'd go to jail for this. The man clearly didn't get how much trouble he was actually. Ju Hyuk just looked at him, completely unfazed. He told the president he didn't understand the situation at all. That's when he held up the phone, showing a gallery of secret photos. He said the president was the real trash here. The president's anger vanished, replaced by pure shock. He stammered, asking how Ju Hyuk knew about the hidden camera in the company bathroom, and how he'd managed to unlock the phone. Ju Hyuk told the president he probably couldn't wrap his head around it. In his world, things that seemed impossible were normal. Turns out, the system was giving him a performance reward for the kidnapping mission. It had just unlocked a new skill for him, hacking. That's how he'd gotten past the phone's password. Ju Hyuk asked the president if he finally understood the situation he was in. He held the phone up, wondering aloud what would happen if he just handed it over to the police. Looking through the files, Ju Hyuk started to understand why the system had sent him after this man. But then he saw something else. He tapped on a folder simply labeled list. What he found inside was a sponsor rejection list. The name alone made his blood run cold. Ju Hyuk stared at the phone, completely disgusted by what he'd found. The president, tied to a chair, just watched him. He looked up from the screen, a cold smile on his face. He decided to ask the man a question. His expression turned dark. He asked the president what he truly thought an employee was. The president just smirked. He said that dogs are supposed to obey their master. He went on, saying that people who didn't know their place were worthless. He claimed he was just giving them a chance to learn. Ju Hyuk had heard enough. With a single squeeze, he crushed the phone in his hand. He looked at the man with pure disgust. He told him he was worse than trash, that there was no saving him. But the president didn't even flinch. He just casually pointed out that Ju Hyuk was committing a crime too. Ju Hyuk grabbed the president's chin, a cold look on his face. He decided to make the man a twisted offer, the same one he'd received earlier. He would pay him for every slap he took. He pulled his arm back, telling the man to be thankful for the lesson he was about to receive. The president screamed in fury, threatening him not to lay a single finger on him. Ju Hyuk just grinned and slapped him across the face with all his strength. The impact sent the president and the chair crashing to the ground. He lay there on the cold floor, completely stunned. Ju Hyuk sat down on the man's back, looking down at him. He asked if having a little money really gave him the right to treat people like that. The president was back in his chair, terrified. He stammered, asking what Ju Hyuk really wanted from him. He said that people like the president just show up and make things even harder for everyone else. He asked if it was fun to look down on people. Then, without waiting for an answer, he slapped him hard across the face. The president's head snapped back from the force of the blow. He stammered, asking what Ju Hyuk wanted from him. Ju Hyuk calmly replied that he only wanted one thing: for the president to feel just once how unfair it all was. The man looked up, finally understanding. The situation was far worse than he imagined. His voice trembled as he started to say he was wrong. But before he could finish, a voice echoed from the shadows. Someone else was there holding a knife, and he had just found them. The man with the knife seemed confident, telling his partner they could probably save the guy. The president saw them and started screaming for help, yelling that he'd been kidnapped. One of the men told him to just wait. A mission alert popped up on his wrist: rescue the civilian for 200 million won. They turned to Ju Hyuk. The man with the knife said it was nothing personal, they just had their own mission to complete. Ju Hyuk just smiled and gave a little wave. He told them he knew and that it was fine. His casual attitude was weird. The man with the bat felt like something was seriously wrong here. His partner turned to ask him what they should do. But it was too late. A foot slammed into his face with enough force to crack the ground. The man with the bat just stared, completely stunned. He couldn't even understand what had just happened. Before he could even react, Ju Hyuk was already moving. A single punch landed right on his jaw. It wasn't even a fight. Ju Hyuk moved like a blur, hitting him from every angle. Just like that, it was over. But more people started showing up, all of them players trying to complete the same mission. The president watched everything, sweating and terrified. But every time a new challenger appeared, the result was the same. Ju Hyuk wasn't just winning, he was playing with them, laughing as he took them all down. The difference in their power was just too big. The president was freaking out. He knew this was his best chance to escape, but he was tied up and couldn't move an inch. With all the other players taken care of, Ju Hyuk finally turned his attention back to the president. He pulled out a knife and sliced right through the ropes. President watched, sweating, not sure if this was a rescue or something worse. But when he looked up, he saw Ju Hyuk standing over him with a huge, unsettling grin on his face. The president fell back onto the floor, completely free but terrified. Ju Hyuk just looked down at him and said he came over because the man looked bored. He then suggested they negotiate his salary. He demanded 5 times his current pay and a new position where he could earn a lot for doing almost nothing. He took a step closer, saying there was one last, very important thing. He leaned down and told President B that from now on, he was going to be his dog. He let out a wild laugh. Then he leaned in and told the President Diok man that they were going to get along just fine. Miles away, a different kind of game was about to start. It was late at night at a high-security prison. Inside one of the cells, the walls were cracked and falling apart. A voice called out a number, prisoner 3270. A guard peered through the slot in the door. He told the prisoner inside to just hang on for one more day. The guard smiled, explaining that soon the prisoner would get to run wild. A mission popped up on his wrist: help a first-degree felon escape from jail. The reward was massive. Inside the cell, the prisoner stood up. He was a huge man built like a tank. He turned his head, blood already on his face. The system had a message for him. It said that once he succeeded in the mission, a punishment game would begin, and from the look on his face, he was more than ready for it. Inside, the office was already buzzing. Everyone turned to watch as Deputy Chief Choi walked in. He asked his co-workers what was going on, but they seemed just as confused as he was. That's when he saw it, his face went pale with shock. Sitting in a ridiculously fancy chair in what looked like the president's office was Ju Hyuk. He smiled and wished everyone a good morning. He casually started to explain the situation. He announced that by the president's order his position had been changed to a special one. Deputy Chief Choi just stared, completely lost. None of this made any sense. Deputy Chief Choi could only stare, sweating. He couldn't figure out what Ju Hyuk had done to the president to just take over his office like this. Ju Hyuk just smiled at them all, saying he was looking forward to working with everyone. But that wasn't what was really on his mind. He thought about the glasses. They had completely changed how he saw the world, especially when it came to money. He'd made a fortune enough to last a lifetime and then lost it all in a single moment. Everything was just gone. But then the system offered him a way back, a loan ticket. And just like that, he was back in the game. He'd earned a ridiculous amount of money in a single day. But he wasn't happy about it. A main mission had popped up, make $1 billion in just 7 days. If he failed, everything would be reset to 0, and he was running out of time. The system's warning was clear. If he couldn't make $1 billion, all his money would be reset to 0. Ju Hyuk was panicking. He couldn't let his account be reset. This time, there was no loan ticket to save him. He slammed his fist on the table. He didn't care what kind of mission it was. He just needed the system to give him something, anything. He sat there, waiting for the next game to begin. And just like that, a new game started, miles away at a high-security prison. Inside the central control room, an officer radioed a prisoner escort van, asking for a situation report. The van radioed back. They reported that all 10 prisoners, including one special target, were secure. The officer in the control room confirmed the message. He told them to report back immediately if anything went wrong. The guard calmly confirmed the message over his radio, but he was standing over a body holding a brutal knife. Something was very, very wrong. With a twisted smile, he turned around, jingling a set of keys in his hand. It was time to begin. He walked right up to the gate, separating him from the prisoners. The gate swung open, showing rows of prisoners sitting quietly inside. Then he threw the keys into their section. They landed right in the hands of one of the inmates. The guard just grinned. He told them it didn't matter what they did, there was no escaping. He explained that once the game started, hackers would block all police communications. He told them to just run as far as they possibly could. The prisoners looked on, confused. A game. The prisoners couldn't believe what they were hearing. They wondered if the guard was actually letting them go free. The guard looked down at his watch as a notification popped up. The game for the prison breakers was about to begin. But this wasn't about freedom. A new mission appeared for a different group of people. It was a punishment game, and their job was to hunt down the escaped criminals for a bounty. The system immediately put a price on their heads. Go Chang-sik, a murderer, was worth 100 million. So was Na Hyun-gu, a car thief who had taken out a cop. So the game was set. On one side, men desperate for freedom. On the other, men desperate for money. The only question was which group was more dangerous. The hunters were already armed and waiting. One of the prisoners reached out, his face hidden behind a mask. But this guy was different. Prisoner number 3270. His bounty wasn't just 100 million, it was 500 million. He was the main target. Inside the prison transport van, the escaped criminals were buzzing. One of them turned to their leader and asked what the plan was now. Another prisoner spoke up, reminding their boss, Man Sik, about some money he'd buried. He said they should go find it right away. Man Sik grinned. He told them he knew a guy who could smuggle them out of the country as soon as they had the cash. But they weren't alone. A drone was already tracking the bus from above, watching their every move. One of the hunters watched the tracker on his wrist, wondering where the escapees were headed. His partner pointed out that if the prisoners went somewhere quiet, it would only make their job easier. One of the hunters calmly checked his weapon, a spear gun. He looked ready. He told his partner they needed to go. They weren't the only ones after the bounty, and he wanted to get there first. About 4 hours after the punishment game started, things were quiet. Too quiet. That's when one of the hunters spotted his target and yelled for him to stop. He didn't wait for an answer, he just fired. The spear hit the escapee right in the leg, and he screamed in pain. He collapsed to the ground. The hunter just stood over him, making fun of him for being a crybaby. He started dragging the man away, telling him this is what happens when you don't live a proper life. He grinned, explaining that if they caught the prisoners one by one, the others wouldn't even notice. But a voice came from the darkness. Turns out, someone else had the exact same idea and was already hunting them down. The man in blue grabbed the hunter's wrist, smiling. He pointed to the watch, casually mentioning that a lot of guys like him had been showing up. The hunter's confidence completely disappeared. He was terrified. In a flash, the prisoner had the hunter's own weapon pressed against his throat. The hunter stammered, trying to ask who they were. He wasn't interested in talking, he just swung his fist. The punch landed hard, sending the hunter flying backward. A scream echoed through the quiet field. He hit the ground hard, completely taken out. The red-haired man walked over to his leader. He reported that he dealt with the pests in the area, explaining that they had attacked their lookout, Kai Chial. The leader of the prisoners looked down at the man kneeling before him. His subordinate asked how many people they'd taken down so far. The massive prisoner grabbed the man by his hair, a wide grin on his face. He said he didn't know. The captive was sweating, completely terrified as the prisoner's grip tightened. He explained that the ones being hunted were the other participants. He just didn't bother to keep count because it was too annoying. The prisoner admitted it had been a while since he'd had this much fun. With a sickening crunch, it was over. The ground was littered with bodies. They had taken out everyone in the area. The leader looked over the scene, completely unfazed. He told his partner that was enough of that. The leader ordered his men to find the buried money and fast. All around him, the other prisoners started digging frantically. The night was quiet except for the sound of shovels hitting dirt. He then added a threat: anyone who couldn't find anything would be left behind. The men looked terrified, digging even harder. Just then, his red-haired partner came over with some strange news. He said the people they'd been taking down weren't just gang members. He explained that somehow their personal information was being displayed on the enemy's watches. And it wasn't just information. Turns out there were bounties on their heads. The leader's expression changed from confusion to excitement. He eagerly asked how much he was worth. His partner told him the number, 500 million. The big man started laughing like a kid on Christmas morning. He was thrilled, saying that getting a bounty had always been his dream. But his partner was sweating. He couldn't believe his boss was so happy, especially since 5 of their own guys had just been taken down. Mansick, the leader, didn't seem to care at all. He flexed and asked his men how much money they'd found so far. One of them reported they'd already found bundles of millions, with 3 more left to dig up. Mansick looked at the paint cans stuffed with cash. Whoever buried this had really played it big. That's when the red-haired man's expression changed. A greedy smile spread across his face as a plan started to form. He figured he could just take advantage of his stupid monster of a boss and get rich himself. He threw his hands up and started laughing like a madman. With that much money, this was a new beginning for him. But they weren't alone. Someone was watching them from a distance through binoculars, wondering what on earth those two were doing. Then the observer saw the hole in the ground and the paint cans. It was obvious they had found a huge stash of buried money. But through his binoculars, he saw the bodies piled up. He realized this was way more dangerous than he'd first thought. His partner looked nervous and asked if they were really going through with this. The man with the binoculars didn't hesitate, saying they'd come too far to back out now. Besides, with all that money buried in the ground, there was no way they could just give it up. They all agreed to go big. But one of them was having second thoughts. He quietly wondered if it was really right to hunt people down like this. His partner immediately grabbed him. He angrily asked if he'd even seen their target's criminal records. He told him those guys weren't human. He listed off the bounties on their heads, hundreds of millions for each one. He shoved him back into his seat, telling him to get it together and stick to the plan. Their own lives were on the line too. With the argument settled, the leader picked up a crossbow. He laid out their strategy. They would hunt them down one by one from a distance. It was the safest and smartest. The leader smirked, sure of his plan. If their targets tried to run, they wouldn't get far. But just then, a face with a huge, creepy grin appeared right in front of him. The hunter's confidence vanished instantly. He let out a scream of pure shock. He aimed his crossbow at the stranger, but Ju Hyuk just told them there was no need to be on guard. He smiled, claiming he was just an ordinary office worker. One of the other hunters stared, sweating. An office worker? Out here, nothing about this made sense. Ju Hyuk's friendly act disappeared. He held a baseball bat, his energy swirling, and asked if they were participants too. Then he pulled out a knife, licking the blade with a wild look in his eyes. He told them he had a good plan and asked if they wanted to hear it. The hunter's face twisted in anger. He didn't care who this guy was. He finally understood Ju Hyuk's so-called plan. He wanted to use them as bait. The hunter snapped. He aimed his crossbow and yelled at Ju Hyuk to get lost, saying they weren't pushovers. He gave him a final warning, leave by the count of 3 or he'd shoot. The hunter started counting down. But Ju Hyuk didn't even flinch, calmly telling him that his plan was the best method they had. He hit 3 and pulled the trigger, screaming for Ju Hyuk to die. The arrow shot forward in a blur, flying straight for its target. But a second later, he was standing there completely unharmed, a look of surprise on his face. The arrow was gone. In a flash, Ju Hyuk had moved, catching the arrow right out of the air. He held it perfectly still between 2 fingers, completely unharmed. The hunters just stared, their minds completely blown. They couldn't process what they had just seen. Ju Hyuk looked back at them, not a hint of worry on his face. He held up the arrow for them to see. He told them they'd made a huge mistake. They never should have told him when they were going to shoot. Then with a loud snap, he broke the arrow in half with his bare hands. He called them amateurs. That's when they saw he was holding a huge blade ready for a real fight. He told them to listen while he was still being nice. Then he asked if they had any more complaints. The hunters were shaking. They quickly said they had no complaints at all. Ju Hyuk grinned. With that settled, he announced it was time to start the operation. The operation was taking place at a lone building out in the middle of nowhere. A group of men were busy digging up a field, searching for something. One of them cursed under his breath. Turns out, their boss had forgotten exactly where he'd buried the money. He suddenly stopped when he noticed people approaching. He had no idea who they were. It was the 3 hunters. They walked onto the field like they owned the place. Ju Hyuk smiled, laying out the first part of his plan. The hunter's only job was to lure their targets to a place he'd already picked out. The spot was a quiet, isolated house deep in the woods. One of the hunters sprinted towards it, completely out of breath. He thought safety was just ahead. He just had to make it there. The 3 of them finally reached the house, but they stopped, confused. There was absolutely nothing there. The leader looked around, furious. He yelled, demanding to know where their target was. He started to wonder if Ju Hyuk had lied. That's when another group of men walked through the gate, armed with shovels and pipes. The leader of the new group smirked. He told the hunters they were pests and complained that now he'd have to dig new holes to bury them in. Another one of the men grinned, suggesting they could just burn the bodies after they were done. Without warning, he swung the shovel down like an axe. But just then, an axe came flying out of nowhere. It slammed into his shovel, stopping the attack cold. The man stared in disbelief. The axe dropped and stuck into the ground. He spun around, screaming, demanding to know who was responsible. And then they saw him. It was Ju Hyuk, calmly lighting the tips of a bundle of arrows. He let the flaming arrows fly into the dark. He calmly explained that there was only one thing they needed to know. The arrows hit the dry roof, and it instantly burst into flames. The fire spread like crazy, consuming everything around it. Ju Hyuk stood on a wall, looking down at the inferno. He told everyone that from this moment on, none of them were getting out of it. The men were completely surrounded by the flames, trapped. Ju Hyuk continued, telling them to just stay put and let him beat them up. He finished with a huge, crazy grin, demanding they hand over the money. The other hunters stared, completely stunned. They finally realized his plan wasn't just for their enemies, it was for them too. With his trap set, Ju Hyuk leaped down from the wall, landing right in the middle of them. The men started to freak out, seeing their only escape route blocked by the fire. One of them tried to calm the others down, shouting that it was only one guy. But he never got to finish that thought. The punch landed with incredible force. He hit the ground hard, completely out cold. The others just stared, stunned by how fast it happened. The first one was already out of the fight. Ju Hyuk struck a pose with a grin. He told them that now was the right time to panic. That was the last straw. Furious, the remaining men grabbed their weapons ready to fight back. They all charged at once, knives out, trying to overwhelm him with numbers. One swung a massive tool while another went for stab, but Ju Hyuk didn't even flinch. The man lunged, a wild grin on his face, absolutely sure he was about to land a hit. But Ju Hyuk's eyes were cold and steady. He was processing everything. That's when a purple light flashed across his glasses. The system kicked in. He moved in an instant, landing a brutal punch right on the man's jaw. Before the second attacker could even react, Ju Hyuk was already there, blocking the knife with his arm. He didn't just block it, he caught the blade with his bare hand, stopping it completely. With the knife stopped, Ju Hyuk didn't waste a second. He moved faster than they could see, unleashing a series of strikes. The man just stood there, his mind completely blank. He couldn't even process the attack. A moment later, the damage hit him all at once. He collapsed to the ground, and his partner stared in disbelief. Ju Hyuk didn't give him time to think. He threw the knife he'd just caught. It hit the man's hand perfectly, knocking the weapon right out of his grip. Both knives clattered to the ground. Ju Hyuk looked down at him, his expression cold. The fight was already over. The last man didn't even have time to scream. Ju Hyuk's kick sent him flying. He hit the ground hard, and that was it. In just a few moments, all three of them were on the ground, not moving. The two hunters who'd been watching from a distance could only stare. They couldn't believe what they just saw. It was impossible. One of them realized something. In a game where you have to choose between your life and money. That man wasn't like them. He was on the side of survival, no matter the cost. The system confirmed it. The mission was complete. He'd taken down the criminals and earned another $1 million. But he wasn't alone anymore. Someone else was walking onto the scene. A man in a blue uniform stood between the burning gates, holding a knife. He angrily demanded to know who was responsible for the fire. Then a window popped up in Ju Hyuk's vision. This wasn't just some guy. He was a prisoner with a long criminal record and $1 million bounty on his head. The prisoner pointed his knife at Ju Hyuk. He asked if he was the one who had taken down the others. Ju Hyuk just smiled back, completely unfazed. He asked if the prisoner was there to get revenge for his friends. But the prisoner said no. He explained he was just there to tell Ju Hyuk to finish a job once he starts it. Then he knelt down and drove his knife into the man on the ground. He looked up from the body and called Ju Hyuk an amateur. He said he should have sent them on their way in peace. Ju Hyuk just watched him, his face completely unreadable. The prisoner grinned, holding his brutal knife. He asked Ju Hyuk if he was ready to have a few holes put in his body. Ju Hyuk didn't even flinch. He calmly replied that he was always ready, mentioning he'd been stabbed a few times before. The prisoner's grin widened. He thought Ju Hyuk's response was hilarious and decided to start the fight right then. With a wild laugh, he lunged forward, aiming the knife straight for Ju Hyuk. He closed the distance, sure he was about to land a fatal blow. But then his expression changed. The smile vanished from his face. He had missed completely. Ju Hyuk had dodged the attack so fast it was like he wasn't even there, leaving the prisoner completely stunned. The attacker's mind raced. Ju Hyuk had dodged with his left hand. Turns out the man was ambidextrous. He could fight equally well with both hands. The attacker grinned, clearly impressed. He couldn't believe Ju Hyuk had dodged the attack. But Ju Hyuk just held up a hand, telling him to wait a second. The attacker laughed, asking if he was scared. He told him to go ahead and pick up a knife. Ju Hyuk completely ignored him. He turned and started looking through a pile of junk, telling his partners he'd been thinking about what to use. He grabbed a heavy metal pipe, deciding that this would be more than enough. The other hunters watched, terrified. Ju Hyuk calmly stated that it had been a while since he'd had to get serious. Instead of the pipe, Ju Hyuk picked up 2 small farming hoes. He looked down at them with a dark smile. The man with the knife just stared. He couldn't believe what he was seeing and asked if Ju Hyuk was serious. Ju Hyuk's smile widened. He told the man he was absolutely serious. Then with a crazy grin, he struck a fighting pose. A system message appeared announcing his skill, twin hose praying mantis form. In a flash, he moved. The next thing the attacker knew, Ju Hyuk's face was right in front of his. He grinned and asked him if he was scared. The man with the knife thought back to all the people he'd faced before. They always started out looking so tough. But as soon as he pulled out his knife, their attitudes would change completely. He remembered how even the most arrogant guys would end up on their knees, begging him to spare them. It always happened after they got stabbed a few times. He loved watching them break, but this guy was different. Ju Hyuk just stood there, grinning like a madman. Without another word, he charged. The system announced his skill, twin hose attack. The man with the knife could only think one thing: who the hell was this guy? He moved in a blur, swinging the small farming tools with blinding speed. The man with the knives was immediately on the defensive. He was getting pushed back, struggling to block the storm of attacks. He couldn't believe it. He was being overwhelmed by a guy using farming tools. His confusion turned to pure anger. He was the double blade, a master fighter, and this was humiliating. He lunged forward, but Ju Hyuk dodged the attack like it was nothing. Instead of looking serious, Ju Hyuk just started laughing. A huge, crazy grin spread across his face. The attacker froze. This was a fight where one wrong move could get you taken out, and this guy was laughing. And that's when he finally understood. Ju Hyuk wasn't scared because he knew there was zero chance he could lose. The attacker finally figured out what felt so wrong about this fight. Ju Hyuk was treating him like a bug, someone who could be crushed without a second thought. That feeling of being looked down on was too much for him to handle. His face twisted with rage. He screamed, demanding to know who Ju Hyuk thought he was to look down on him like that. Ju Hyuk just stood there watching him come. He calmly asked a simple question, why shouldn't he look down on him? And in a flash he moved. The fight was over in an instant. Ju Hyuk's hose hit with brutal force. The attacker was sent flying, his knives knocked right out of his hands. He moved with incredible speed, a blur of motion. The system message was almost mocking him. The attacker had charged forward, completely unaware of his own weakness. The man slammed into the dirt, completely defeated. Ju Hyuk stood over him, not even breathing hard. He looked down at the man, saying that someone who didn't know their place could never be strong. A system notification popped up, confirming the criminal was taken care of, and another million was added to his account. With a wild look in his eyes, he realized there was only one target left. He turned to his partners and asked if they were ready to climb a mountain to earn 500 million. And just like that, he was off, leading the others into the dark woods. The next mission had begun. One of the men with him looked terrified. He nervously asked if they could just leave now. Ju Hyuk just turned back with a grin. He asked why they'd want to go when there was still one person left to catch. The man explained that the last target was a monster. He was infamous for taking down gangsters with his bare hands, and he was the one who had gotten rid of most of the other participants. He told Ju Hyuk they never had any intention of going after him. Trying to do it without any real weapons felt like suicide. Suddenly, one of the men froze. He'd heard something moving in the trees behind them. His face twisted in absolute horror. A voice came from the darkness, asking if they were talking about him. A huge man with bright blue hair was standing right there. Before anyone could even react, the three partners were sent flying backwards through the air, completely taken out. The man with the scarred forehead grinned, saying he guessed he didn't need an introduction. He moved in a blur, landing a massive punch right in Ju Hyuk's chest. But Ju Hyuk didn't even move. He just stood there completely solid. Before the big man could even pull back, Ju Hyuk slammed an elbow into the side of his head. He was grinning the whole time. The attacker stumbled back, touching his jaw. He looked genuinely surprised. He couldn't believe it. He asked how Ju Hyuk had not only taken the hit but had blocked it so easily. A smile spread across the attacker's face. This was getting interesting. Ju Hyuk just smiled right back. Ju Hyuk moved first. He closed the distance in a flash, grabbing the big man by the shoulder and slamming a hand right into his neck. He wasn't holding back at all. The blow landed hard, sending a shockwave through the man's head. But Ju Hyuk wasn't done. He immediately spun into a kick. It connected perfectly with the side of his opponent's head. The attacker just stood there completely dazed. Blood started to run down his face. Ju Hyuk looked back at him, a cold, satisfied grin on his face. But the big man just shook it off. He immediately launched a powerful kick right back at Ju Hyuk's head. Ju Hyuk realized this guy wasn't just tough. His attacks were actually getting stronger. But Ju Hyuk was faster, ducking under the swing just in time. The attacker kept swinging, but Ju Hyuk was like a ghost, weaving between every punch. His plan was simple. As long as he didn't get hit, he couldn't lose. Watch the man's movements carefully, waiting for the perfect moment. The big man dropped into a low stance, gathering all his power for one more attack. He exploded forward, kicking off the ground so hard that it cracked beneath his feet. The big man lunged, his face twisted into a wild grin. He was sure he had him this time. But instead of getting caught, Ju Hyuk used the man's own momentum to throw him. He took a hard hit in the process, spitting blood. But it didn't matter, he had the big man trapped. The attacker's confident grin vanished. He was caught. With a grunt, Ju Hyuk slammed him hard into the ground. He leaned in close, a smirk on his face. He reminded the man that with their difference in size, getting caught meant the fight was over. He told him to stop struggling, explaining that some people just ignore the rules of common sense. He explained that some people can tap into superhuman strength when they are pushed to their limits. It's a survival instinct that flips a switch in your brain. A massive burst of adrenaline and endorphins floods the body, pushing it past its normal capabilities. That's when things get really dangerous. The man he was holding couldn't even breathe. He was being lifted off the ground with just one hand. The attacker was completely stunned. This shouldn't be possible. Ju Hyuk looked down at him and apologized, explaining that he's a bit special. He said that he normally has to control his strength in these situations. But then he looked the man in the eyes and asked if he was durable, making it clear he was about to find out. A chilling grin spread across Ju Hyuk's face. He looked at the man and told him to just die then. Without another word, he brought his hand down with incredible force. The man's head hit the ground so hard it cracked the pavement. It was over in an instant. A message popped up from the system. It confirmed the criminal was taken care of, and Ju Hyuk had just earned a 500 million bounty. Drones circled overhead recording everything. The system announced that all the criminals had been hunted down. The mission was complete. He wiped a bit of blood from his lip, complaining that his muscles would be sore after all that. He checked his total earnings over 2 billion. Standing there in the moonlight, he thought to himself that this all felt familiar. It reminded him of the old days. The other guys who were watching couldn't believe what they saw. They were stunned that he had taken the man down all by himself, using pure strength to overcome the massive size difference. As Ju Hyuk stood over the defeated criminal, two of the other hunters started whispering to each other. One of them had an idea. He suggested they take the money the criminals had buried. He was sure Ju Hyuk didn't know anything about it. The group then walked up to Ju Hyuk. They told him he'd worked hard and that they would take care of the rest, asking him to leave. Ju Hyuk didn't even look at them. He just repeated their words back, questioning if they were really going to handle it. The men looked uneasy. His quiet response was clearly not what they were expecting. Ju Hyuk started to reply, but then he saw something flying right at his face. His eyes widened. It was a dart from a tranquilizer gun. Before he could move, it hit him right in the neck. But he wasn't the only target. The other hunters were hit by darts too, collapsing to the ground. The other hunters dropped to the ground, completely knocked out. But Ju Hyuk was still on his feet. He could feel the drug trying to take him down. Through his glasses, he tried to the person who shot him. A man in expensive-looking shoes calmly walked toward him. The stranger sounded impressed, asking how he was still conscious. He wore a suit and a white mask. When Ju Hyuk tried to read him, it failed completely. The system just said access denied. Ju Hyuk glared at him, demanding to know who he was. The masked man told him to be patient. That's when a huge blue hand wrapped in heavy chains appeared behind him. He calmly said that Ju Hyuk would understand everything soon, as the massive figure towered over them in the darkness. The masked man wasn't alone. He had two cloaked figures with him, and behind them all stood the giant chained creature. Even with the tranquilizer dart sticking out of his neck, Ju Hyuk just smirked. He wasn't going down without a fight. But the drug was just too strong. His body gave out and he collapsed to the ground. The masked man looked down at him. He seemed pleased, saying that things were only going to get better from now on and that he was looking forward to it. Ju Hyuk was completely out cold. That's when a new message from the system flashed in his vision. It confirmed his name, Kim Ju Hyuk, and his current assets of 17 billion. But the most important part was the final message. He had officially been registered in the rankings. Suddenly, he was somewhere else. A prison engulfed in flames. A lone figure in a yellow jumpsuit walked through the fire, barefoot and torn. A voice echoed in his mind, asking why he did it. The figure looked completely broken, with empty eyes. He looked over at the other cells, but the prisoners inside looked like monsters. The voice came again, asking why he ran away by himself. Tears streamed down his face as he desperately denied it. Ju Hyuk's eyes snapped open. He shot up in bed, breathing heavily, completely confused. He was in his own home, but he had no idea how he got back. His memory after passing out was a total blank. He tried to piece together what happened. The last thing he could clearly remember was taking down that prisoner. Then he remembered the dart. Right after the fight, someone had shot him in the neck. And that masked man, the memory of him sent a sharp pain through his head. He was sure of it, that guy had to be connected to the organizers of the game. Just then, the sound of the TV, which had been left on, caught his attention. The news was reporting a fire on a convoy bus for death row inmates. The reporter stated that everyone on board was believed to be gone. It seemed the organizers had already cleaned up their mess. He just sat there, letting the reality of the situation sink. Enough thinking he needed to know what happened with his mission and the money. He decided to check his account. The system showed his total assets, 17 billion won. The money was safe. With that confirmed, he checked his main mission status. A new objective appeared. He had to collect another billion won in just 7 days. The game's difficulty and rewards were about to increase. He let out a long sigh. For a moment, it felt like the worst was over. But as he rubbed his neck, his fingers brushed against something that shouldn't be there. Just then, a new mission alert popped up. This one was different. A bomb mission had been detected. He reached back and pulled a small device off his skin. It was a tiny bomb with a creepy smiley face. The system warned him there was a time limit. If he failed, it would explode. The next day, everything seemed normal at the office. One of Ju Hyuk's coworkers was walking back from a coffee run. He was annoyed, thinking about how he used to make Ju Hyuk get it for him. He decided it was time to teach Ju Hyuk a lesson about respecting his elders. Just then, someone slammed into him from behind. He angrily told them to get lost. But it was Ju Hyuk, and he was sprinting past like his life depended on it. As he rushed by, a plastic spoon flew out and hit the man right in the eye. The coworker stumbled, dropping his coffee all over the ground. But instead of getting angry, a strange, creepy smile spread across his face. He just laughed, thinking Ju Hyuk must be in a huge hurry for some reason. Meanwhile, inside the office, things were quiet. A woman named Yoo Soo-yeon was working at her desk. She was just trying to get through a normal day. Suddenly, she noticed something. It was Ju Hyuk leaning over her desk with a wild look on his face. He wished her a good morning. She was so startled she almost fell out of her chair. Just stood there smiling. Completely confused, she nervously asked if something was wrong. He nervously explained that he had an important job to do. The system had just given him a new mission, and he realized the target, co-worker Y, had to be Soo-yeon. She looked back at him, completely thrown off. She asked him what kind of important job he was talking about. A new mission window popped up. He had to stay within 3 meters of her for the next 6 hours. So he started making up a story about his new position, saying he'd heard she had too much work and needed help. He tried his best to sound as natural as possible. He told her she could just relax for the day and talk to him instead. Then he pointed to another coworker, Deputy Chief Choi, and announced that he would take care of all her work for her. Deputy Chief Choi looked over, completely stunned by what he just heard. Ju Hyuk just gave him a grin that wasn't a question, it was a command. The poor guy immediately snapped to attention, tears streaming down his face as he enthusiastically agreed to do it. While all this was going on, Ju Hyuk was busy taking control. He sent a text to the company president, Man Deok, ordering him to give out bonuses and donate to charity. He also told him he was about to use the corporate card and that Man Deok had better cover for him. He held up the card with a wicked grin. He was clearly enjoying this. Soo-yeon was thrilled. She asked if she could really decide how she wanted to spend her break. Ju Hyuk agreed, but on one condition: she had to do it with him. She was completely sold on the idea. So her break began. First, they had a picnic in the park. Then they went bowling. Soo-yeon was having the time of her life, saying it was way more fun doing this during work hours. After that, they ended up at the movies. That's when Soo-yeon started to wonder if this was actually a date. But Joo Hyuk wasn't thinking about that at all. He was just watching the mission timer on his glasses, which showed he only had an hour and a half left to go. To cap off the day, they went to a fancy restaurant with a view of the city. Soo-yeon was practically glowing. She said she had so much fun, even more than when she used to skip class in high school. She quickly apologized, worried that maybe she'd gotten a little too carried away. She admitted that she'd been having a really hard time lately. Even though she was working hard, she sometimes felt completely lost. But thanks to him, she felt okay now. She knew he only did all this because of work, but she was still truly thankful. She looked at him, her gratitude obvious. She said that since she was a little tipsy, she wanted to be honest. She started to admit that she's had feelings for him for a long time. But just as she was about to say it, Joo Hyuk stuck 2 knives in his mouth to look like a sea elephant. A mission had just popped up in his vision, make her laugh. Her serious confession came to a dead stop. She looked at him completely confused and asked what on earth he was doing. The ridiculous sight was too much. She burst out laughing, asking if he was drunk too. A notification popped up in his vision, mission clear. He laughed, relieved that her being a little tipsy made it so easy. He figured the system must set these missions at a low difficulty to make up for how dangerous they can be. Just then, a waiter approached their table. He announced that he was serving their last course. But he also mentioned that the restaurant had prepared a small gift to thank them for coming. He lifted the cover to show them what it was. The gift was a device. It looked like a smartwatch sitting inside a fancy box. As soon as he saw it, a new mission popped up in his vision. It was a chained mission. He had 1 hour to put the device on his co-worker and make her join the game. Soo-yeon was completely amazed. She had no idea what was going on and just thought it was an incredible smartwatch. She asked if it was really for them, but Joo Hyuk wasn't paying attention to her anymore. He stood up, his eyes locked on the waiter. He got right in the man's face and demanded to know who he was. The waiter just smiled. His expression turned cold. He warned Joo Hyuk that they were watching. He had to follow the order or he would die. A bead of sweat ran down his face. He realized he'd made a terrible mistake. He really thought he could keep her from getting caught up in all this. Soo-yeon noticed his strange silence. She leaned forward and asked him if something was wrong. Joo Hyuk just stood there, lost in thought. She called his name, trying to break the tension. He was trapped. The game was forcing him to make an impossible choice, weighing one person's life against another's. His expression turned cold. He had made up his mind. He looked at her and said that everything was fine. He then told her it was time for her to go and that he'd see her out. Later that night, he stood outside her apartment building. He found her asleep in her bed. She was completely defenseless. All he had to do was put the device on her wrist and it would all be over. He held the watch in his hand, ready to make his move. He tried to convince himself that his own life was more important than anyone else's. But when he looked at Soo-yeon sleeping peacefully, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He didn't understand why he was hesitating. This wasn't like him. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his head, telling him it was okay and that no one would know. The voice then called him out by his player number, P099 Kim Joo Hyuk. He knew that voice. It was the masked man. The man told him to stop pretending, saying he knew Joo Hyuk was a survivor who would do anything to live. The masked man admitted Joo Hyuk was special, but said in the end, he was just another participant, a human controlled by money like everyone else. He explained that controlling humans was easy because they were selfish. Then he gave a new order, make Soo-yeon a participant in the game, and if he failed, he was to choose the explosion option. But Joo Hyuk just smirked. He mocked the masked man's words, questioning if he really thought it was that easy to control him. He told the voice that it didn't know him at all, and offered to share a few key facts. His hand clenched into a tight fist. The first thing he explained was that the man had seriously pissed him off. And the second thing, when he gets angry, he turns everything upside down. He wasn't just talking anymore. He grabbed a small knife from nearby. He didn't wait for an answer. Instead, he stabbed the knife right into the listening device on his collar. He was done being manipulated. The device sparked and died. The connection was cut. He wasn't their pawn anymore. He decided he was the one using them. A final chained mission appeared, and he was ready to see how far they would push him. Suddenly, a group of drones appeared in the night sky. They were moving over a quiet neighborhood. Without warning, one of the drones opened fire. An explosion rocked the side of a building. Joo Hyuk watched the fire from his window. The system gave him the first part of his choice. He could save the 5 people trapped inside the burning building. Or he could take out an office worker named Y. The reward was 300 million, but he only had 30 minutes to do it. But it wasn't just Joo Hyuk's mission. Other players all over the city were getting alerts about Y. Turns out she was the target for everyone. While she slept, dozens of players were being sent after her. And somewhere else, the masked man watched it all. He thought this new game was going to be very entertaining. Joo Hyuk stared into the distance, processing the mission. Save 5 people or take out one for a massive payday. A cold, focused look settled on his face. He wasn't thinking about right or wrong anymore. He was just thinking about the objective. The drones weren't done. They kept firing, turning the building into a huge fire. Joo Hyuk watched it all happen. His expression was completely serious. The voice came through again, mocking him. It said that now he got to experience this kind of impossible choice for himself, and that he should think carefully before deciding. His first instinct was to call for help. He reached for his phone to dial the emergency line, but the voice told him that wasn't going to be possible. His phone screen started to glitch out. It explained that all the signals in the area were under its control. No fire department, no police. He was on his own. The reality of the situation sunk in. He had to give up on one of them. He took a deep breath, steadying himself for whatever he was about to do. Ju Hyuk made his choice. He burst into the target's building, screaming at the top of his lungs about a fire. But his face wasn't scared, it was the look of a soldier on a mission. His shouts echoed through the halls, warning everyone to get outside immediately. The noise woke up his target. She shot up in bed, completely panicked by the news of a fire. Before she could even react, Ju Hyuk was in her room throwing a blanket over her. He didn't say a word, he just threw her over his shoulder and started moving. She yelled at him to stop, telling him she was too heavy. She was completely terrified, having no idea if she was being saved or taken. He carried her out onto the street as a crowd watched the fire. He finally set her down, telling her that everything was all right now. He gently pulled the blanket over her head, making sure she was safe. He then turned to the crowd, asking if anyone had a phone. He apologized, explaining that there was no time to waste. He told her to stay covered and wait right there, promising he would be back soon. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She asked where he was going, begging him not to go back into the fire. He didn't answer her, his expression was set. He started to explain, telling her about a fire that happened where he lived when he was young. The memory was intense. He recalled how back then he was just a kid, completely powerless and scared. He couldn't do anything but watch. But he explained that after that day he made a promise to himself. He'd made a promise to himself a long time ago. He would never give up on innocent people. With his mind made up, he sprinted back towards the burning building. The woman he'd just saved screamed his name, but he didn't even slow down. The people watching couldn't believe it. They started asking each other if he was crazy for running back inside. But for most of them, the shock faded quickly. They were just relieved it wasn't their building on fire, watching the mess from a safe distance. The system had a name for this: spectatorship. It's what happens when people see a problem that has nothing to do with them. Instead of helping, they just pulled out their phones to record. They joked about how much money it would take to convince them to run into a fire like that. Maybe some of them felt bad, but they also felt completely helpless. They just stood there telling themselves there was nothing they could do. And so the crowd just watched the disaster unfold. But Ju Hyuk was different. He was the one person who refused to just stand by and watch. The system explained what people call a person who does something like this. They called him a hero, someone who makes the impossible seem possible. The woman he'd saved just before this watched in complete shock, tears streaming down her face. But Ju Hyuk didn't look relieved at all. He looked like the mission was far from over. He gently laid the men he'd carried out onto the pavement. He turned to the woman and told her to look after them, explaining that they'd breathed in a lot of smoke. Then he said he'd be right back. She yelled after him, asking where he was going. Without stopping, he just looked back and said there was still one person left inside. He had to save them. The system sent him a warning. Another player was only a minute away. If he went back into the fire, his other target would be in serious danger. He had to make a choice, and he had to make it now. That's when a memory hit him, a fire from his past. He remembered being just a kid, trapped and completely powerless. But this time, he wasn't powerless. A strange, almost crazy smile spread across his face. He decided he would save the person trapped inside, and he'd do it in under a minute. He took off, sprinting back toward the building. He didn't hesitate, charging up the burning stairs. The voice in his head returned, mocking him, asking if he really thought he could save everyone. He questioned if there was even a need to go this far. But Ju Hyuk just kept running deeper into the flames. Ahead of him, the entire hallway was a wall of fire. He pushed through the flames and his eyes widened. There on the floor was a person completely passed out. The voice in his head returned, sounding amused. It told him that since he broke the rules by making a choice that wasn't an option, he was about to get a penalty. A blue icon popped up in his vision. The voice laid out the terms. If he saved the person lying in front of him, it would take 1 billion won straight out of his account. Ju Hyuk couldn't believe it. The voice asked if he would still save the person even with that price. Then a red glitchy icon appeared. The voice made a new offer. If he left the person to die, it would give him 1 billion won instead. The choice was clear: save a life and lose a fortune, or walk away 1 billion won rich. Meanwhile, outside the building, people were starting to panic. They wondered why Ju Hyuk still hadn't come back out. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the city, the hunt had already begun. A woman was stopped on the street by a stranger. The man asked if she lived at a specific address. She looked confused and asked if she knew him. She definitely didn't recognize him. Then the man's face twisted into a horrible grin. He told her he'd missed her so much, and his eyes looked completely unhinged. Before she could even react, he grabbed her arm. She tried to pull away, asking what he was doing. That's when he pulled out a knife. He ordered her to follow him without making a sound. She was frozen with fear. The player just smiled, then slammed the knife down into a metal railing to show her he wasn't playing around. The player holding the woman hostage suddenly looked up. Something big was happening just down the street. Through the smoke, a figure landed on the ground. A voice cut through the air, ordering the attacker to put the knife away. It was another player wearing a mask. He was already carrying someone he'd saved from the fire. He looked directly at the attacker. His warning was simple: if he touched the woman, he was a dead man. The attacker's face went pale. He realized Ju Hyuk was another participant, here for the same 300 million won prize. He started stammering, trying to claim the prize money for himself since he was the first one to find the target. His greed took over completely. He screamed that the money was his and lunged forward with the knife. He wasn't going after Ju Hyuk. He was trying to finish the mission right then and there. The attacker lunged, but he never made it. A shoe came flying out of nowhere. It smacked right into his hand, knocking the knife away from the woman. He was furious. He couldn't believe he'd been stopped by something so ridiculous, muttering that it was all useless struggling. The woman was frozen in fear, sweat dripping down her face. She had been seconds away from the end. She looked up and Ju Hyuk was standing right in front of her. But then Ju Hyuk turned and started running away. The attacker saw this and started to laugh, taunting that it was too late. He was sure Ju Hyuk was abandoning her, leaving him to finish the job. With a huge, twisted grin, he raised his knife again. He thanked Ju Hyuk for the money he was about to win. Blood dripped onto the pavement, but it wasn't the woman's. Turns out Ju Hyuk hadn't run away. He turned back and caught the knife with his bare hand. The attacker was completely stunned. His grip was like steel, even as the blade cut right into his palm. He glared at the man, reminding him of his warning about touching the woman. The attacker panicked, trying to pull the knife free, but it wouldn't budge. Suddenly terrified, the man tried to bargain, nervously suggesting they split the prize money. Ju Hyuk just stared down at him unimpressed. The offer was met with cold silence. Then with no warning at all, he slammed his forehead straight into the attacker's face. The man collapsed to the ground, completely out cold. The fight was over. With the attacker taken care of, Ju Hyuk finally had a moment to breathe. But he realized he'd breathed in too much smoke from the fire. His vision started to blur, and the world began to fade. He hit the ground hard, completely out. The woman he just saved stared down at him, worried. She rushed to his side, calling his name and trying to wake him up. Just then, a car pulled up and someone else stepped onto the scene. It sounded like they'd been looking for him. A man in a nice suit looked down at the two of them. Turns out he was another player. The system identified him as Jin Young Cheol, ranked 31st. He was on the phone asking someone if he should take Ju Hyuk with them. On the phone, Jin Young Cheol's tone changed. He wasn't asking if he should help anymore. He was asking if he should just get rid of Ju Hyuk right now. The woman Ju Hyuk had just saved heard him. Her eyes widened in terror. And Ju Hyuk was still out cold on the pavement. He had no idea he was just inches away from being taken out for good. While he was out, Ju Hyuk heard a voice begging for help. At first, he thought it was just another dream. But then his eyes shot open. He was in a strange room, his wounds bandaged. He realized the voice wasn't a dream, it was a kid's. He looked across the room and saw exactly what was happening. A man was standing over a terrified young boy who was backed into a corner. The boy was crying, begging for someone to help him. The man just got angry, telling the kid to shut up and stay still. His expression was cold. He was done waiting. He reached down to grab the boy by the throat. But before he could touch him, Ju Hyuk's hand shot out and stopped him cold. The man couldn't believe it. He was completely caught off guard by the sudden show of strength. Ju Hyuk's grip was like iron. He warned the man to stay away from the kid. But they weren't the only two in the room. Someone else was watching. Sitting in a chair was an older man, and he was holding a pistol. He calmly told them to stop causing trouble in his area. Ju Hyuk turned. He recognized him instantly. It was the ranker from before. The man, Jin Young Cheol, aimed the gun forward. He warned Ju Hyuk that acting without thinking was just digging his own grave. Ju Hyuk's eyes shifted back to the boy. He noticed a strange device on the kid's fist. He was terrified. That's when it hit him. They were using children for this twisted game. A dark look crossed Ju Hyuk's face. He was absolutely furious. Ju Hyuk stood firm, keeping the boy behind him. He looked straight at the two men and told them to let the child go. Jin Young Cheol didn't seem threatened. He just asked why Ju Hyuk would risk everything for a kid he'd never even met before. Ju Hyuk's answer was simple. The kid had asked for help. And he added they both looked like criminals anyway. Jin Young Cheol's finger tightened on the trigger. A wide grin spread across his face. He told Ju Hyuk that if he wanted a criminal, he'd act like one. Ju Hyuk saw the shot coming. Before anyone could blink, he threw himself in front of the boy using his own body as a shield. The other man yelled out, completely shocked by his speed. The gun fired, but it wasn't a bullet, it was just water. The spray hit Ju Hyuk right in the face. He was soaked, but he wasn't hurt. He looked down. The boy he had just protected was hiding his face, trying not to laugh. The kid looked up with a huge, twisted grin. He pointed right at Ju Hyuk as if to say he'd caught him. He started laughing, proud that Ju Hyuk had fallen for his act. Ju Hyuk just stared, completely confused by what was happening. Then it clicked. The kid wasn't a victim. He was working with them. The realization made Ju Hyuk furious. He grabbed the boy by his hoodie. The kid's smug look vanished, replaced by pure panic as he begged Ju Hyuk to wait. The boy was terrified. He yelled for the other two men in the room to do something, screaming that Ju Hyuk's face was too scary. One of the men told Ju Hyuk to calm down, promising he'd explain everything. The other man just sat there quietly, a gun resting in his lap. They looked at Ju Hyuk impressed. The seated man smiled, commenting that he was even better than they thought. Ju Hyuk finally let the boy go. He turned to the two men and demanded to know who they were. The man in the chair just apologized for tricking him. He explained that it was just a test. The boy was actually under their protection. But from the look on the kid's face, he really thought he was going to get hurt. Then he introduced his group. He said they were the Participant Liberation Group. Since there was a lot to talk about, they sat down for coffee. The man looked at Ju Hyuk and said he'd get straight to the point. The man started by explaining what happened to Ju Hyuk's co-worker. He said she was safe in the hospital, but the shock of the attack made her forget everything that happened. He showed Ju Hyuk a picture on his phone as proof. It was her smiling and making a peace sign, but in the background, you could see her lying unconscious in a hospital bed. Then he explained that the one who saved both Ju Hyuk and his co-worker was the other man in the room. He joked that it was the first time he'd seen someone scarier than Ju Hyuk. The man, Jin Young Cheol, just smiled, proud of his acting. The leader asked if that finally answered Ju Hyuk's questions about who they were. Ju Hyuk thought it all over. Based on everything he'd seen, their story seemed to be true. He finally spoke, thanking them for saving him. But he knew there had to be a reason. They didn't just help him for no reason. The leader didn't deny it. He pointed out that Ju Hyuk had already become a ranker and his money was piling up fast. but he asked him how long did he really think that would last. As if to prove his point, a system window popped up. It showed Ju Hyuk's current assets were at 1.7 billion and he was already ranked 91st. The leader explained that as Ju Hyuk's rank and money grew, he'd become a target for other players and powerful groups. Ju Hyuk's mind flashed back to the attack. He knew the man was right. There were things he couldn't handle alone, and he admitted to himself that his co-worker was in danger because of him. He couldn't shake the feeling of dread. What if something like that happened again? Seeing his chance, the leader cut in. He told Ju Hyuk he had a proposal. He asked Ju Hyuk to join them, to become a member of their liberation group. And if he did, the leader promised to give back all 800 million won he had taken from him. Ju Hyuk couldn't believe what he was hearing. In return, all he asked was for Ju Hyuk to work with them toward the same goal. The thought echoed in Ju Hyuk's mind. He'd get his 800 million back. A small, cynical smile crossed Ju Hyuk's face. He thought to himself that this guy was a total swindler. Ju Hyuk just smirked, saying he wasn't a swindler. So Jin Young Cheol laid out a new deal. He'd give Ju Hyuk 400 million upfront if he cleared a team game with one of the Liberation Group members. The rest of the money would come later. He argued that since Ju Hyuk wasn't going to stop playing the game anytime soon, it was a pretty good offer. He said he'd send the time and location later. Ju Hyuk listened quietly, his face giving nothing away. With the offer on the table, Jin Young Cheol told him to think about it. Later that night, the city glowed. Ju Hyuk was alone in a quiet restaurant thinking. He admitted to himself that none of this felt real at all. The fact that he had 1 billion won in his account was almost impossible to believe. And on top of everything, he knew there were still more rewards left to get. He decided to go ahead and confirm the reward. The system announced he'd cleared the entire chained mission. His reward was a coupon for a random item, which would be delivered by drone whenever he used it. But just then another notification popped up. He wasn't expecting this at all. It was a message from someone powerful. They said they were impressed with him and would overlook his rule breaking this time. They told him to enjoy the break because they wouldn't be directly involved for a while. He wasn't sure if he should feel relieved or more worried. After everything that had happened, one thing was clear. This money could disappear at any moment. He looked at his bank account, 1.7 billion won. But the system blocked any large withdrawals, so before it all disappeared, he had to do something. The chef placed a piece of sushi in front of him. Ju Hyuk decided it was time to finally taste what all this money could buy. He took his first bite, his eyes shot open in disbelief. A single meal here cost a fortune, but for the first time in his life, the price didn't matter. It was a special chef's choice menu, the kind of thing he'd only ever seen online. The food practically melted in his mouth. This was the taste of a life he could only imagine before. He leaned back completely satisfied. It reminded him of something he saw on TV a while ago. An interviewer asked a lottery winner what changed after getting rich. The winner said they could finally eat what they wanted without looking at the price, and their dream of owning a house came true. Ju Hyuk remembered his own bleak reality back then. That kind of freedom was all he had ever wanted. The winner on TV said the most important thing was that he could do whatever he wanted. With no money worries, his life had become so much easier. Ju Hyuk imagined it for himself, the life of the rich. He made up his mind he was going to enjoy this life to the fullest. 4 days passed. The system announced the location for the next game. It was a school. The other participants were already gathered inside. They all looked like trouble. Ju Hyuk walked right into the middle of them without any hesitation. He had a huge grin on his face. He was actually looking forward to this. The other players weren't happy to see him. They watched Ju Hyuk walk in, already sizing him up as an enemy. But Ju Hyuk didn't care what they thought. He was already planning how he'd spend the prize money. That's when a voice told him he was late. He turned, wondering if this was his partner for the team game. Standing there was a kid, a young boy with a band-aid on his face. He waved and asked Ju Hyuk to look after him during the game. Ju Hyuk recognized the name of the group the kid was from. He realized this wasn't just some random boy. This kid was probably dangerous. He couldn't believe they wanted him to clear a team game with a middle schooler. He asked the kid how old he was. The boy just said he was 15. Ju Hyuk just let out a nervous laugh. This was getting ridiculous. All around them, the other players watched. They looked like a pack of wolves just waiting for the game to begin. The other players were already whispering amongst themselves. Two of them looked down at Ju Hyuk and the kid with smug grins. They had already picked their first target. Ju Hyuk stood there completely silent. He felt like he'd been completely tricked by the old man who set this up. He was hoping for a strong partner, but this was the opposite of what he wanted. The kid looked up at him and asked if he was even strong, saying another guy named Young Cheol was more dependable. The kid muttered about being stuck with a weak partner, but one of the other players heard him and got in his face, calling him a brat. The boy didn't back down and insulted the man's looks. The man was furious, shouting that he didn't like the kid. For a second, the kid's hands started to tremble, but then he looked down, his fear turning into resolve. He told himself that this time he had to win. Ju Hyuk let out a short sigh. He was done with the complaining. He put a hand on the boy's head and told him to just believe in him and follow his lead. He promised he was more than strong enough to protect a kid. The boy looked up, stunned by the sudden show of confidence. Just then, the first game was announced. All the players stood in their teams, waiting in front of the school. A voice came over a loudspeaker announcing the name of the second game, Protect the King. The system explained that there would be 4 teams, and on each team, one person would be randomly chosen as the king. The rules were simple. The game ends when 2 teams are eliminated and no weapons are allowed. If a team's king surrenders or gets taken out, that team loses instantly. As the rules were explained, a device on the kid's wrist suddenly lit up. He looked at Ju Hyuk, his voice trembling as he tried to get his attention. The kid looked down at his wrist. A bright yellow crown symbol had appeared on his bracelet. He was the king. Ju Hyuk knew this was bad. Normally, being the king meant you could do whatever you wanted. But in a game like this, it just meant you were the main target. All around them, the other players stared them down. They had already chosen their first target. The countdown began. The kid called out to Ju Hyuk, his voice shaking. He was terrified, saying that everyone was ganging up on them, but Ju Hyuk just smirked. This was exactly what he expected. A loud voice echoed across the field, announcing that the game had begun. Instantly, two guys from another team charged straight for the kid. Before he could even react, a hand clamped over his mouth, cutting off his scream. It was Ju Hyuk's hand. He was silencing the kid to keep him from panicking. Before the kid could even process it, Ju Hyuk lifted him up and threw him onto his shoulders. He took off like a shot, easily dodging the attackers. One of them called out, surprised by how fast he was. But the man just smirked. He pointed out that by protecting the kid so obviously, Ju Hyuk was just exposing his own team. He had figured it out. He laughed and asked if Ju Hyuk really planned on taking on everyone by himself to protect the king. The other players immediately understood. Once a target was chosen, everyone would gang up on them. The kid started panicking, screaming that he was scared and grabbing at Ju Hyuk's hair. But when he looked down, Ju Hyuk had a terrifying, insane grin on his face. The kid was horrified. This wasn't a protector. To him, Ju Hyuk looked like a battle-hungry demon and a Asura ready for war. The kid was completely losing it, screaming at Ju Hyuk for a plan. But Ju Hyuk just told him to stay still and shut up. From the side, one of the other players couldn't believe what he was seeing. The man decided he'd seen enough. He was ready to get this over with. But just as he was about to move, something else caught his eye. Two other players with green hair were standing near the school, just staring at him. He glared back, angrily demanding to know what their problem was. His partner stepped up beside him. They accused the other team of planning to jump them from behind. The man in the polo shirt decided talking was over. He told the other guy they'd just have to take them out first. Ju Hyuk watched all of this from the middle of the field. This was perfect. While the other teams were busy threatening each other, he had a chance to make a move. But the kid was still panicking. He started slapping Ju Hyuk's face, desperately trying to get him to pay attention to the fight that was about to break out. While the other teams were distracted, one of the players in a red shirt started creeping up behind Ju Hyuk, ready to attack. But Ju Hyuk didn't even seem to notice. The guy had a twisted grin on his face. He thought he could take down the king with a simple sneak attack. Ju Hyuk looked completely bored by the whole thing. He just told the kid on his shoulders to stand up straight. The kid was totally lost. He had no idea what Ju Hyuk was planning. That's when the two attackers charged, screaming for everyone to get him. But Ju Hyuk didn't even turn around. He just tightened his grip on the kid's shoe. And then he just threw the kid straight up into the air. The attacker in red froze, completely stunned. The kid sailed through the air, screaming his head off. The kid landed perfectly back on his feet. While everyone was distracted by the flying kid, Ju Hyuk had already taken out both attackers with two brutal kicks to the face. Then just as casually, he reached up and caught the kid by his shoe. He just held him there, dangling in the air. The kid stared down at the two unconscious bodies, completely stunned. He couldn't figure out who or what this person was. Ju Hyuk finally set him down and told him to stay put while he took care of the others. But a second later, he changed his mind, deciding it was better if the kid stayed right behind him. With that settled, he turned his attention to the rest of the players. Across the field, the game was just as brutal. Another player begged for his life, but his opponent showed no mercy. The man on the ground screamed for his attacker to stop. But the green-haired player just smiled cruelly, saying he was having too much fun. His opponent cried out, clutching his face and asking what he'd done to his eyes. The attacker spat something onto the ground. It was a piece of flesh covered in blood. He calmly explained that he hadn't touched his eyes. He'd bitten his nose. The injured man was furious, swearing he would make him pay for this. The green-haired player didn't seem to care. He just grabbed the man's head and smashed it into the dirt. The green-haired player stood over the body, completely unfazed. He'd finished his opponent without breaking a sweat. Ju Hyuk watched this, a grim look on his face. The kid with him looked terrified, hiding behind him for protection. The attacker smirked and walked over to his partner. They both looked like they were enjoying this way too much. Ju Hyuk realized these guys weren't just playing a game. They were genuinely dangerous, and they were staring right at him and the kid. Suddenly, a voice echoed from a megaphone. The system announced that the first game was over. The second game would begin in 10 minutes. The announcement continued, telling everyone that the next round would be held in the gym. Inside, the two teams faced each other across the basketball court. The tension was thick. Ju Hyuk turned to the kid and asked if he really had to be here. The boy looked back, his expression serious, and insisted that he absolutely had to clear this game. Ju Hyuk couldn't figure it out. He wondered why this kid, who seemed so scared, was so determined to clear the game. Suddenly, the gym doors opened. A figure stood in the entrance, announcing that he was the host of the game. The man walked forward. He had white hair and wore a bright yellow smiley face mask. He called himself Puppet. Ju Hyuk's expression soured. He'd never seen this guy before and didn't like the look of him. Puppet addressed the remaining players, congratulating them for finishing the first game so quickly. He didn't waste any time. He turned to a large screen and announced he was revealing the second game right away. A simple blue box appeared on the screen. Then the box opened and cards with question marks flew out. The second game was called 2 Random Card 1 Touch. Puppet announced that the rules were simple. But looking at the other players staring them down, Ju Hyuk knew this was going to be anything but easy. The screen showed a bunch of cards, each with a different body part. Puppet explained that for each turn, every team would receive one of these cards. The rules were brutal. On your turn, you had to attack the body part shown on your card. But when it was the enemy's turn, you had to take a hit on whatever body part they drew, and you weren't allowed to move to block it. Then Puppet added a huge twist. He explained that the king could order their teammate to take the hit for them. And the king's orders were absolute. If a team member refused, they'd be instantly eliminated from the game. With the rules explained, Puppet glanced at his watch and announced that the game was starting now. A bead of sweat ran down Ju Hyuk's face. This was not good at all. He looked over at the other players. With opponents like them, this game was way too dangerous. Ju Hyuk looked down at the kid, thinking this was all too dangerous. He suggested they should just stop now, but the boy told him there was no need for that. Looked up at Ju Hyuk, asking if he had some kind of secret plan. That's when the kid's whole attitude changed. A creepy smile spread across his face as he held up his wristband, showing a crown symbol. He was the king. Ju Hyuk froze. He finally understood the horrible truth. The king's orders were absolute. A splash of blood hit the floor. He stumbled back, clutching his side. He'd been forced to take the hit for his own teammate. Puppet started explaining the rules. For each turn, every team would get a card with a body part on it. The rules were simple and brutal. On your turn, you had to attack the body part shown on your card. But when it was the enemy's turn, you had to take a hit on whatever body part they drew, and you weren't allowed to move to block it. Then Puppet added the biggest twist. He explained that the king could order their teammate to take the hit for them. And the king's orders were absolute. If a team member refused, they'd be instantly eliminated from the game. With the rules explained, Puppet glanced at his watch and announced that the game was starting now. A bead of sweat ran down Ju Hyuk's face. This was not good at all. He looked over at the other players. With opponents like them, this game was way too dangerous. Ju Hyuk looked down at the kid, thinking this was all too much. He suggested they should just stop now, but the boy told him there was no need for that. The kid looked up at Ju Hyuk, asking if he had some kind of secret plan. His whole attitude suddenly changed. A creepy smile spread across his face as he held up his wristband. It had a crown symbol on it. He was the king. Ju Hyuk froze. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The horrible truth of the game's rules started to sink in. He asked the kid directly if this meant he could order him to take a hit in his place and just stand by and watch, even if it meant he'd die. The kid didn't even hesitate. He said that if it meant he could win, then that's exactly what he was going to do. The kid flinched, closing his eyes and bracing for a hit. But Ju Hyuk just rested his hand on the boy's head. He said he didn't know what kind of burden he was carrying, but wondered why he looked like his whole world had fallen apart. Suho looked down, and that's when he started to tell his story. He remembered his sister. Even though she was covered in bruises, she would always smile and tell him everything was fine. Their father had run away, leaving them with a huge debt. Their life was a mess, and the debt was crushing them. But his sister was always more worried about him than herself, always making sure he was okay. One day, she told him she had found a way out. Someone offered her a job and promised to clear all their debt if she just worked for them for 2 years. She smiled and promised she would protect him, but she never came back. Tears streamed down Suho's face. He explained that this was why he had to win. This time, he was going to be the one to protect her. He was absolutely desperate. Then he looked straight at Ju Hyuk and told him he wouldn't need to use his power as king. He would take the hits willingly. Ju Hyuk turned his back to the kid. He explained that adults are supposed to protect children, so there was no need for the king to give him any orders. The host added one last rule. Teams could decide who would attack and who would defend, and they could switch at any time. The two teams stared each other down from across the court. With the rules explained, Puppet raised a small remote and pressed a button. The first cards for the round were revealed. The system announced the first move. The other team was attacking, and the body part was the fist. For their team, the defending part was the torso. Ju Hyuk just smirked, looking like this would be easy. A nasty grin spread across the attacker's face. He took a firm step forward, closing the distance. The fight was on. The attacker slammed his fist right into Ju Hyuk's side. It wasn't a random punch. He was aiming for the liver. The liver is the biggest organ in the body, and a direct hit there causes an insane amount of pain. Ju Hyuk stumbled, clutching his side. He had to admit this guy knew exactly how to hurt someone. Puppet glanced at his remote and announced it was time for the next round. The next card was revealed. The other team was attacking the eyes. A bead of sweat ran down Ju Hyuk's face. At the same time, his team's defending part was the ear. The attacker just grinned. It felt like Ju Hyuk's terrible luck was turning this into a completely one-sided beatdown. The cards kept coming one after another. Elbow to the forehead. Ju Hyuk just accepted his fate and took the hit. Then it was hand to the nose. The damage was piling up fast, and it was obvious Ju Hyuk was taking a serious beating. The next card was right foot to the face. The attacker landed a brutal kick right on target. But as he pulled back, the attacker started to sweat. Something felt wrong. This guy was taking way too much punishment. The next card was lips to lips. Ju Hyuk just stared back with a brutal grin. He didn't seem to feel any fear at all. In fact, he looked completely unhinged. His eyes were glowing as he kept muttering that he just wanted to hit them back just once. The first attacker was clearly freaked out. That's when his teammate stepped in and pushed him aside, saying he wasn't attacking properly and that he'd handle it from now on. Puppet looked at his device and announced the player switch for the attacking team. The new attacker drew his card, knee to the torso. He smirked at Ju Hyuk, telling him that even though he was pretending to be fine, it was obvious he was in bad shape. Ju Hyuk knew he was right. The damage was piling up and his old wound had opened again. The attacker saw his chance, confirming it was obvious and promising to end him right there. Just as the attacker was about to strike, Puppet made an announcement. Ju Hyuk's team was also switching their defender. He looked back in shock. The kid was taking his place. Ju Hyuk demanded to know what he was thinking. The kid just looked back and reminded him that it was an order from the king. He explained that he needed to test something. He promised he could take the hit and told Ju Hyuk to just focus on the attack when it was their turn. The green-haired attacker stepped up to face the kid. He smirked, taunting him and asking if he'd ever taken a real hit before. With a twisted grin, he warned him that real pain is always worse than you can ever imagine. And then he drove his knee right into the kid's stomach. The shock and pain hit him all at once. It was clear he'd never felt anything like that in his life. The force of the blow made him sick right there on the gym floor. Puppet didn't even pause, announcing that the next card was already being opened. The screen showed the next cards. The attack was a flick to the forehead with the middle finger. The kid, still recovering from the last hit, couldn't believe it. He thought it was just another useless card. But Ju Hyuk stepped forward. He told the green-haired attacker it wasn't useless at all and that he was attacking now. He raised his hand, ready to show him exactly how it was done. He got his fingers into position and asked the guy if he'd ever been hit by a real forehead flick before. The attacker just laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. He told Ju Hyuk to just get it over with. Ju Hyuk pulled his finger back, loading it with all his strength. The flick connected with a sickening crack. The attacker was sent flying backwards, screaming in pain. It was no joke at all. The king let out a crazy laugh, clearly loving the brutality. His other teammate just watched, completely terrified. The green-haired attacker stumbled, completely dazed. He couldn't believe the destructive power that came from a simple flick. That one hit changed the entire flow of the game. The next cards appeared instantly, a hand to the eye. But then it was the other team's turn. The cards showed a fist to the torso. A huge grin spread across the king's face. He stepped forward and drove his fist right into the attacker's side. It was payback for the liver shot from before. The green-haired man screamed in agony. The other team was getting frustrated with only taking hits. But it didn't matter. The next cards were drawn and it was their turn to attack again. The next cards were drawn, it was their turn to attack, a thumb to the torso. King let out a wild grin and jabbed his thumb right into the green-haired man's side. He announced he was hitting the exact same spot as before. The green-haired man fell to his knees, gasping in pain. He begged his king to stop and let them switch places. But the king's order was cold and final. He told his teammate to just keep taking the hits. He would be the only one doing the attacking. The king glanced over at Suho. He was sure that if just one more attack card came out, the kid wouldn't be able to take it anymore. But Suho knew what they were thinking. He was determined to endure it no matter what. Believed this was the only way for his team to win. But his resolve was immediately put to the test. The next cards appeared, a foot to the torso. The next cards appeared, it was the enemy's turn to attack, a fist to the nose. The enemy king moved to attack, but he wasn't aiming for Suho. He was going to hit his own teammate again, just like before. But this time, Suho didn't just stand there and watch. He charged forward. The king's fist slammed into his teammate's face. At that exact moment, Suho crashed into the king, using the force of the attack to take them both down at the same time. And just like that, both opponents were knocked out cold on the gym floor. Suho stood over them, covered in blood. He looked up at the host and asked if what he did was against the rules. The host simply replied that it wasn't against the rules at all. He congratulated Suho on winning the game. The kid looked up at Ju Hyuk, his voice shaking. He couldn't believe it, asking if they'd really won. Ju Hyuk checked if he was all right. He admitted that when the kid said he wanted to test something, this crazy plan was what he had guessed. Turns out the kid had figured out a hidden rule. A king who sacrifices his teammates eventually runs out of people, but a king who protects them would be the one to win. Ju Hyuk was impressed. He asked how he came up with that. The kid just said it was because their team kept getting bad cards at the start. Ju Hyuk gave a small, tired smile. He told the kid he'd worked hard. But the kid's face suddenly turned serious. He said he didn't think the game was over because they hadn't gotten any reward. That's when the host reappeared. The screen behind him lit up, announcing the final game, Rebellion and Suppression. The rules were brutal. The final two players would no longer be a team. They had to fight each other, one as the king and the other as the citizen. Ju Hyuk's eyes widened in shock. The rules for the final game were simple. The citizen's goal was to rebel. The king's goal was to stop him. The fight would continue until one of them fainted or gave up. But there was a catch. The king had to first take as many hits as he'd forced Ju Hyuk to take for him. Ju Hyuk couldn't believe it. After everything they'd been through, the game was forcing them to turn on each other. The kid was panicking. He insisted there had to be some other way out of this. Without saying a word, Ju Hyuk slapped him hard across the face. The kid just stood there completely stunned as tears started to stream down his face. Ju Hyuk looked down at him, his expression cold. He told him to stop being weak and face what was happening. He made it perfectly clear. From this moment on, they were enemies. That was the only reality that mattered. The kid stared back, his expression frozen as Ju Hyuk kept talking. Ju Hyuk's face was splattered with blood, his eyes wide and intense. He warned the boy that he was not a very nice person. The kid's mind went blank. He had to fight Ju Hyuk. He just stood there, head down, completely broken. He knew it was an impossible fight. Even with a weapon, he stood no chance against that man. Tears streamed down his face. He had no idea what to do. For a moment, he actually thought about just giving up. That's when Ju Hyuk spoke. He asked if the person the kid was trying to save just wasn't that important to him. The kid looked up, stunned. Ju Hyuk reminded him of his promise, saying that giving up now showed how little that person really meant to him. He told the kid to think about the terrible things that person was enduring, all while waiting to be saved. Ju Hyuk kept pushing, pointing out that for someone trying to save a loved one, the kid didn't seem to be in much of a hurry. He told the kid it wasn't his problem if that person didn't make it. It would be the kid's family member who was gone, not his. Then Ju Hyuk asked the most painful question of all, what if that person was already gone? That was it, the kid screamed and charged forward, throwing a punch with everything he had. Ju Hyuk watched him come. He said it would hurt his pride to fight a kid. So he made him an offer, just one blow. He told the kid that if he could just land a single hit. But the boy was so emotional he tripped and fell flat on his face. Ju Hyuk finished his sentence. If the kid could land just one punch, he would give up the game. The kid just lay there on the floor, completely humiliated. He looked up completely stunned and asked if Ju Hyuk was serious about his offer. Ju Hyuk just stared back and said of course he was. That's when he started to explain the reality of the world. Ju Hyuk told him that just having a strong will wasn't enough to achieve anything. He said that being desperate didn't mean anything either. The kid gritted his teeth, unable to do anything. Ju Hyuk finished his lesson. In the end, he told him, the only things that can protect someone you love are money and power. But Ju Hyuk wasn't finished. He explained that the very things that create money and power. The kid's hand slowly clenched into a fist. Are willpower and desperation. The kid looked up, tears still in his eyes, but now they were filled with fire. Ju Hyuk told him that's why. He should never give up. With a yell, the kid threw a punch with everything he had. The punch landed hard, but Ju Hyuk just took it, a small smile forming on his lips. He looked at the boy, pleased. He told him he knew he could do it if he just put his mind to it. The kid lowered his head, completely spent. That's when Ju Hyuk told him to surrender. The kid looked down, completely defeated. He told Ju Hyuk he was giving up the rebellion. With that, a message appeared on the screen behind the host. The final game was over. The host began to announce the winner. Sometime later, in a quiet room, someone was getting patched up. It was the kid Lif. He winced, complaining that it really hurt. The man treating him Mr. just laughed. He asked if the prize money wasn't enough to make him feel better, sarcastically asking if he looked like a social worker. Mr. pointed over his shoulder, joking that the real social worker was right there. Ju Hyuk then asked Lif how much money he'd won. Lif looked a little nervous. He told them he won 700 million won, then asked who Mr. was. Mr. explained that after paying off a 300 million won loan, Lif's total assets were now around 1 billion. But Lif just stared ahead with a crazy smile, drooling at the thought of all that cash. Ju Hyuk smirked and told Lif that Mr. was here to collect his payment. He then joked about the 200 million he lost without ever getting to use it. That's when Mr. walked into the room. He looked at Ju Hyuk and asked if he lost the final game on purpose. Ju Hyuk just adjusted his glasses and said that's how things worked out. Mr. smiled and thanked him. He explained that because Ju Hyuk threw the match, Lif could finally be freed. Ju Hyuk seemed relieved to hear that. He asked if Lif was using the prize money to buy his freedom. Mr. shook his head. He explained that Lif had already paid 2 billion won for his freedom. But a new condition was added at the last second, forcing him into the game. If he failed, the money would be lost and he'd remain trapped. The condition was simple. To be free, Lif had to win first place in a game. Mr. explained that Lif got 700 million won and his freedom back. But he pointed out how messed up it was that the organizers could just change the rules and add new trials whenever they wanted. In the end, he said, everything was completely up to them. He warned that these people could hack entire national systems and control their every move. The players were nothing more than playthings in their hands. But then Mr.'s tone changed. He reminded Ju Hyuk to remember that despite all that, he had just saved someone from that hell. Ju Hyuk didn't say a word, just taking it all in. Mr. then switched topics to the 400 million Ju Hyuk was owed. He asked how he wanted it, offering cash or even gold bars. Ju Hyuk looked completely stunned. He couldn't believe it. Gold bars were something he'd only ever seen in movies or on TV. A huge, greedy grin spread across his face. He told Mr. he wanted the gold bars. Mr. just told him to wait a moment. And there they were, 5 bars of pure gold shining brightly. Mr. explained that each bar was worth over 80 million, making the total a little more than 400 million. Ju Hyuk just stared, completely speechless. Seeing it in real life was completely different. A massive greedy smile spread across his face. This was real. Watching from the side, Mr. dryly commented on how much Ju Hyuk seemed to love money. But the kid just smiled, saying that to him, Ju Hyuk was still a great person. Meanwhile, Ju Hyuk was lost in his own world, laughing like a madman. He started dancing around the room, shouting about how gold was the absolute best. Mr. turned to the kid and asked if he was really sure about Ju Hyuk being a good person. The kid just sweat, nervously stammering that he was. Still holding the gold bars, Ju Hyuk gave a greedy smile and told the kid he did a great job. The other man in the room told the kid that if Ju Hyuk didn't help find his sister, he should call him. He promised they'd find her together. But the kid just smiled to himself. Even though Ju Hyuk was strange, he still believed he was a good person. With things settled, the kid waved goodbye as he and the other man walked off into the evening. Mr. watched them go and asked Ju Hyuk if he was really not going to join them. Ju Hyuk just admitted it plainly. He was too greedy for money to go with them. As Mr. started to walk away, Ju Hyuk told him he figured they'd end up working together again later anyway. Mr. simply told him to take care of himself. And with that, Mr. walked away, leaving Ju Hyuk to his own choices. 6 days later, things had changed a lot. Ju Hyuk was living a completely different life now. He pulled up to a fancy hotel and the valets just stared. Ju Hyuk stepped out looking like a different person. He had the expensive watch, the fancy car. He was enjoying the money he'd earned. He went inside to a private bar at the top of the building. But even with all that money, he was still sitting there completely alone. He thought about his bank account. He now had 1 billion won. It wasn't just cash either. He had gold bars plus the car and watch he'd taken, which were worth hundreds of millions. All told, his total assets were around 1 billion. He took a sip. The alcohol tasted sweet. His life had completely changed and he was now living like the super rich. But there was one other big change in his life. Someone new had appeared. He looked over as she walked up. He'd met her by chance right here at this bar. It was his first time meeting someone from that world, but they got along surprisingly well. She wasn't just attractive, she was smart, and he found himself enjoying her company. He especially liked her smile. It was so genuine that he couldn't figure out why she was even interested in him in the first place. But he noticed something was off, he just couldn't put his finger on it. She leaned in with a smile, admitting she had a bad drinking habit. Then she playfully asked if he was falling for her. Ju Hyuk was a little thrown off. He wondered if he was just completely failing to notice her advances. She decided she'd have to make her intentions perfectly clear. She grabbed his tie, pulling him closer. She told him she was too drunk to get home by herself. Then she looked him right in the eyes and asked him to please take her home. And just like that, they were in her room. She climbed right into his lap. Ju Hyuk was completely caught off guard by how direct she was. Just as she leaned in, the scene flashed back to an hour earlier. He had taken her home just as she'd asked. They arrived in front of a massive, expensive-looking apartment building. He couldn't believe it. He asked if this was really her place, knowing these apartments were worth billions. She just smiled and said yes. That's when it really hit him, she lived in a completely different world. Thinking his job was done, he tried to politely say his goodbyes. But she didn't let him finish. It was pouring rain and she reached out, not wanting him to go. She gently grabbed his arm. She asked if he could please stay with her for a little while, at least until the rain stopped. Ju Hyuk was taken aback. He still felt like this was all moving way too fast. And just like that, the flashback was over. He was back in the present, lying on her bed. He couldn't even process how they'd gotten to this point. She was leaning right over him. He tried to tell her that he thought she was really drunk, but she didn't seem to be listening at all. He realized she wasn't drunk at all. She just smiled down at him. She reached for his face and told him to take off his glasses, but he grabbed her wrist, stopping her instantly. Her playful look vanished. She seemed completely surprised by his strength. The next thing she knew, she was the one on the bed. She looked up at him and started to speak. With a smirk, she asked who would have thought he was into this kind of thing. Ju Hyuk wasn't playing along. He told her to stop joking around. He pleaded with her one last time. Something was definitely not right here. Suddenly, her entire act just fell apart. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered that she just wanted to forget everything. He watched her, realizing he'd just seen the weak side she'd been trying so hard to hide. A moment later, she was completely asleep. He stood there for a while, admitting to himself that he was seriously starting to worry about her. The rest of the night passed quietly. After that day, things started to change. He thought about his old routines. Back then, he would have given a difficult person an intense mental lesson until they begged to turn themselves in. He thought about how he used to spend his time. His evenings were simple. He'd just kill time watching videos on his phone. But these days, things were completely different. He'd leave work early to go on dates with her. It was a life he never thought he'd have. The night was clear and quiet. They took a walk through the park. Every day with her felt genuinely enjoyable. But the longer he spent with her, the more he thought about the real reason he needed to stay away. He remembered the chained mission from the system. First, he had to make his co-worker join the game. Then he had another option, take her out for a massive reward. The target on the screen was her. And that's why he had already made up his mind. Today would be their last day together. But just when he thought the night was over, she stopped. She looked right at him and asked him to be her boyfriend. Ju Hyuk was caught off guard. He couldn't believe how much her words actually affected him. He knew what he had to do. He told her he was sorry, but he couldn't. Her expression changed completely. She was stunned, telling him he had to be lying. She couldn't understand it. She asked him how he could possibly turn down someone so pretty, attractive, and rich who was asking him out directly. He just thanked her for their time together and walked away. She called out after him, asking if he was really going to end things like this. She couldn't believe he'd rather get caught up in some game than be with her. Her whole tone changed. She warned him that if he walked away, his ordinary life would become a living hell. He stopped in his tracks. Something about what she said felt very wrong. She looked annoyed. That's when a system message popped up, saying 300 million won had been taken away for mission failure. He realized she was a participant in the game. He started to sweat. He'd never seen her with any kind of device, so how was this possible? And the full mission details appeared. Her goal had been to start a relationship with him, participant P099, within 10 days. And she had failed. She pointed to her head with a smirk. She asked if he'd figured it out yet. Turns out she was a special participant just like him. She asked if he was shocked to find out there were others like him. She could tell he was new to all of this. That's when a new mission popped up, but this one was for her. The system had just ordered her to take out P009. She smiled, telling him he really shouldn't have rejected her. His eyes went wide. He had made a huge mistake. Without another word, she attacked. He barely dodged the throwing knives that flew right past his head. This woman was no ordinary person. She seemed surprised he managed to avoid her attack. Turns out she was ranker number 22, a professionally trained fighter. Ju Hyuk knew fighting her with his bare hands would be tough. He had to think fast. So he made the only logical choice. He ran. She watched him run, a smirk on her face. She wondered if he wanted to play a game of tag. But Ju Hyuk wasn't just running, he was buying time. He quickly used a random item exchange voucher from the system. He just needed a few seconds for the delivery to arrive. But she was already there. The ranker landed softly, blocking his path. She looked at him, impressed. She figured he must have had some training to dodge her attack and told him he should have mentioned it. She admitted that she was actually looking for a strong man. With a grin, she made a strange offer. If he was stronger than her, she might actually fall for him. She suggested they find out who was better. That's when she heard a faint sound from behind her. She whipped around thinking the attack was coming from her right. But she realized instantly it was a trick. The real threat was on the other side. Ju Hyuk had appeared right behind her. He'd just thrown a few stones to make her look the wrong way. She was furious. She couldn't believe she fell for such a simple move. As she turned to face him, Ju Hyuk cut her off. He asked what would happen if he turned out to be the stronger one. She didn't answer, she just lunged trying to stab him, but he caught the blade right in his hand. Turns out the random item he'd gotten from the system was a pair of high-tech anti-cut gloves. The knife couldn't even scratch them. Ju Hyuk looked at his hands, a new plan already forming. Suddenly a drone flew through the night sky, dropped a small box right near them. A message popped up confirming the delivery was complete. The woman saw this and immediately jumped back, creating some space. But she wasn't scared, she just smirked, finding the whole thing interesting. The system told Ju Hyuk the item had been received and was ready to use. That's when blue gloves appeared on his hands, crackling with electricity. Their special feature was a powerful taser shock. Her smile vanished, she was completely caught off guard. With the advantage now his, Ju Hyuk finally started to speak. He looked her right in the eyes and asked a simple question. Was all the time they spent together just an act? She just smirked back at him. She confirmed it was all an act, then casually asked why he was even bothering to ask. Ju Hyuk stared at his crackling glove. He decided that for playing with his heart she deserved a punishment. A huge, crazy grin spread across his face. He told her she was sentenced to 1,000 volts. Her smile completely disappeared. She was stunned, finally realizing this wasn't a game.